Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Revolutionary salute. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host. The y'all mean a revolution, and Trump done pissed off NATO. He done pissed off the EU. He got fake media hot. They saying he surrendered to Putin. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, I had some revolutionists for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I got some revolutionary breakfast for y'all. I had some different information we're going to get into because the boule, they should be ashamed of themselves, this Black history. But we'll deal with that later on tonight. Salute, Queen. First, we got to deal with Trump being blamed for surrendering to Putin, which Joe Biden really should have surrendered his goddamn self. We said it was nothing Trump was going to be able to do but accept Putin's offer, and that was everything he wanted and nothing for Ukraine. And let's get into that. What is going on? And why are they saying they want Europe is saying they want to be at the table now. No, you haven't been paying for none of this. You've been sitting there being a flunky to the U.S., and now Trump is treating them like what they really are, puppets.
NATO allies are warning this morning that Ukraine and Europe must not be left out of any peace talks after President Trump's surprise announcement yesterday that he and Russian leader Vladimir Putin have agreed to start negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. Arriving at the NATO defense ministers meeting in Brussels today, the U.S. Defense Secretary denied claims the U.S. is turning its back on Ukraine.
There is no betrayal there. There is a recognition that the whole world and the United States is invested and interested in peace, a negotiated peace. As President Trump has said, stopping the killing.
Joining us now for more on this is CBS News national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata in our D.C. bureau. Charlie, NATO has held that there should be a united front against Russia in its war in Ukraine. So how is this new U.S. position under Trump being received by the alliance?
Well, Errol, I'll be honest with you, opinions are divided. Which in itself is no good thing. Most European partners are in agreement, as we've already reported, that Ukraine should not only have a say in any negotiations going forward, it should be led in the negotiations going forward. But the NATO Secretary General has tried to pull the alliance together, saying, look, we all want peace in Ukraine. We all want Ukraine to be in the best possible position. But as you said, many were stunned to hear that President Trump had that lengthy phone call with President Putin. Russian officials say that.
How could they be stunned? How could they be shocked? Well, that's what he campaigned on. By the time he keep this promise, how could they be shocked? How could they be stunned that the man told y'all he was going to end the Ukraine war, but they thought he was going to go with the talking points of NATO and Zelensky saying they will not give up any territory. Oh, yes, they are going to give up everything, and they're not joining NATO. That's out the window. So they wonder, well, what are we going to get? You're going to get some peace. You're going to get to stop having your people killed. That's what you're going to get. You absolutely are the losers of this war. And I tell you, Trump can't say this. All he can do is try to put together the pieces the best way he can. This is Joe Biden's fault. But the news is saying Trump surrendered to Putin.
That phone call went on for more than an hour. Both the president and the defense secretary have already said that Ukraine will have to make some concessions. That has caused some ruffles, giving up on any idea of like reclaiming territory taken over by Russia and Russian separatists.
See, that is a myth. How can Ukraine, they don't even have the bodies anymore. So how were they ever going to be able to take back that land? They didn't want to be realistic. They wanted to keep the money laundering going on, and Trump just said, he told y'all he was turning it off. It on to new shit now. He won't war with Iran in the Middle East or China or something, but this is getting nipped in the bud, and they can't believe it because they pathetically weak. Shame on Europe for pretending like they independent nations. You've been a puppet to the West and to Trump. And the thing about Trump, he treats everybody like flunkies. He don't pick and choose. I will say that. He treats the whole world like they nobody, and America is the boss. These Europeans can't take it that he's exposing them as nobodies. Just because he said he pulling out, okay, y'all a bunch of, you're 40 nations. You go do it. He didn't say you couldn't do it. You can't do it.
most importantly, that area around eastern Ukraine and Crimea. That's always been a bargaining chip in future negotiations, not given up before the negotiations have even begun. So I think the real concern here is that Ukraine and Europe are not sidelined by negotiations between the United States and Russia.
And what's noteworthy is, speaking at Brussels yesterday, Secretary Hegseth said, among other sticking points,
How
that
can Trump sideline Europe unless they some puppets? Only way Trump could sideline Europe unless they some flunkies. I mean, Europe. Like Trump said, it's an ocean in the way. I don't got to be part of this conversation. They've been fleecing America. They want, like Trump, they want us to pay for everything and do all the heavy lifting while the royal households in Europe reap all the rewards. That scam is over with, man. And this war, this is a good thing, but we're not out of danger of World War III because they're starting shit and talking about seizing land and all that type of nonsense in Palestine.
any peacekeeping force potentially deployed to Ukraine should be part of a non-NATO mission. Let's just play that clip for our viewers.
Any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops. If these troops are deployed as peacekeepers to Ukraine at any point, they should be deployed as part of a non-NATO mission. To be clear, as part of any security guarantee.
That's going to wind up. See, Putin got the call right there. Putin never said the United Nations couldn't be. He never said that. He never said the United Nations couldn't come into Ukraine. You see, he kept that bargain in peace. He said NATO couldn't, and Britain and France and nations like Germany, you couldn't bring your militaries to police nothing. You hear what the defense secretary just said? It got to be European, but non-NATO. You see, that's the UN. You have some European nations, but non-NATO, that's the United Nations. Then you throw in some Chinese, some African peacekeepers, all that type of shit. They don't like that.
There will not be U.S. troops deployed to Ukraine.
What does that mean? How would that work?
Well, he couldn't have been more emphatic. It's a good question. There is some limited precedence for European forces as peacekeepers, like in places like Bosnia, but nothing on this scale. But you could see something where countries like the UK, which they've already said they may take the lead. But the reason the defense secretary said that are twofold. First of all, President Putin has tried to justify the invasion of Ukraine as an effort to stop NATO expansion, certainly to stop Ukraine from joining NATO. So if you've got NATO forces as part of a peacekeeping force, they'll literally be on the border with Russia, which is something Putin is not likely to accept in any kind of peace negotiations. Then, of course, the ramifications of having NATO troops in Ukrainian territory, say there are flare-ups, which there always are. Then you have NATO allies right in the firing line. Simply put, Article 5, right? That means an attack on one nation is an attack on all. So theoretically, U.S. forces could see themselves drawn into a fight in defense of its allies, directly engaging in a war with Russia.
All right, Charlie, we appreciate your
you wish, sucker, but that's not going to happen because Trump and the U.S. Defense Secretary just told you, U.S. troops nowhere near none of that. Talk to Putin for an hour, man. They didn't play games. They got down to this, man. And I'm pretty sure Putin told him, "Look, man, I might let you get your hands on some of them resources on the black market for cheap." That's all Trump looking for. Trump don't give it. He told Zelensky what he want. He want the resources. He didn't say from who. Putin laughed when he said it, like, "Oh man, I'll give you a little something, Trump, on the black market, man. Don't worry about it. I got you." Now Trump. They all see it Putin way. Putin on the phone with that man for one hour. Now they see it Putin way. I know you do.
My source tonight is one of the few people to see how President Trump and President Putin interact when the cameras aren't necessarily around. Ambassador John Bolton was Trump's national security advisor in his first term, and it's great to have you here, Ambassador, because you've previously said that you believe Putin sees Trump as what you described as an easy mark. You were there for their first meeting in Helsinki. What are your expectations for this one?
This is a war criminal. And Trump took his...
Well, I don't have any expectations anymore.
Trump took this guy's security clearances. He's a war criminal. It ain't a war he haven't loved. Everything done went humiliatingly wrong for him. He said Russia would be defeated. Now he's saying Trump is a buster who Putin done manipulate. All Trump did was come in and negotiate the peace. This is Joe Biden's mistake. But they want more of our money. Remember, Zelensky said he don't even know where $100 billion went once Trump put the pressure on him. He said, "Oh, Joe Biden kept $100 billion." Trump like, okay, I like that type of talk.
I think we know exactly what's going to happen. President Trump has effectively surrendered to Putin before the negotiations have even begun. The positions that Defense Secretary Hegseth announced in Brussels, which I'm sure I'd be stunned if Trump didn't convey them directly to Putin in their phone call, constitute terms of a settlement that could have been written in the Kremlin. Maybe they were written in the Kremlin and got out in propaganda channels. But it's a complete reversal of the U.S. and NATO position on a number of issues. For example, up until today, the official American position was that Ukraine should be returned to full sovereignty and territorial integrity. That's gone. The question of NATO membership as far back as 2008 had been that ultimately Ukraine would become a NATO member. That doesn't look like that's around anymore either. Putin has scored a whole series of victories today. It's hard to encompass them all, but I think one, in addition to these substantive concessions, is that he has now, it seems, exactly what he wants. Putin doesn't want to negotiate with Zelensky. He wants to negotiate with Trump because he thinks he'll get more out of him. And he's absolutely right.
Zelensky is a puppet. How can he negotiate with Zelensky? Zelensky can't say whether or not he joined NATO. Zelensky can't say shit. Putin is a boss who said, I'm not wasting my time with no clowns. I'm going to speak to the man who running this war on the other side of the Atlantic. They mad because Putin, you're damn right, he going to get everything he wanted. His people are winning the war. Listen, Putin don't have to pick up the phone. His military is in position to take it all if they want it. Yeah, they will lose more, but he didn't have to answer the phone. He got other shit to do. And yes, he was going to be humiliating, but the humiliation is here now. And no, Trump didn't surrender. He just negotiated the peace. Somebody had to do it, me.
That you just made about not having Ukraine be in NATO, borders returning to what they were pre-2014, which Hegseth said was off the table. If a Trump official was here tonight and they argued, well, that's just being realistic, what would you say to that?
I'd say that if you're going into a negotiation, you don't announce what's acceptable to you before it begins and give away positions.
The Ukrainians can't take a fucking town from the Russians. How the hell are they going to take all of that territory back? It's unrealistic, and they lost over 1 million people. They're snatching teenagers off the street. See, this is what this man don't understand. They don't even have this. Trump he done seen all the documents. They snatching teenagers off the street. The women rising up in Ukraine. Before I came on this morning, I just seen MPs in the Ukrainian parliament protesting, shutting down the parliament today, this morning, calling Zelensky a dictator. It's all falling apart, but they want to blame Trump. Trump really trying to save a little face. I tell you what, if you don't negotiate now, when Zelensky's hanging, when the Ukrainians hang him in a month or so, that's going to really be humiliation for the U.S. You better let this shit, let Putin them get everything that they wanted before everything crumble and they get their hand on all them dirty files about them biolabs and all kind of nefarious shit been going on in Ukraine.
Hey, I've done a lot of negotiation with the Russians, and there's no country out there that's better at pocketing concessions that you make and then wanting more. We used to joke in Soviet arms control days about a famous Russian negotiator who used to greet the Americans every morning with a jovial, well, what have you got for me today? And that's what we're hearing from Russia. This is something Putin prepared the ground for. Last week he said he agreed with Trump that in the comments Trump had made in the election that the war never would have taken place had Trump been president. So he began the flattery campaign, the release of Mark Fogel, the American hostage, part of the flattery warm-up campaign, make Trump look like the center of attention. Belarus's decision to release an American and a couple others, part of the flattery campaign.
You see this? You see this? Them people releasing Americans, some of them work for the CIA, but who cares? The CIA officer, you American, come on home. This man saying that's flattery to Trump. This is ridiculous, bro. What the hell are you talking about? You got your CIA agents back. Oh, they just trying to flatter Trump, man. Anything Trump gonna do, they gonna complain about it. They don't like it. Damn, that is crazy. Americans is coming back. Why you ain't happy?
Working.
Trump said today also in his own readout of the call that he put out that Putin repeated back to him about using common sense to end the war. Do you think that that's part of that flattery campaign?
Right. Well, there was a tweet or whatever you call those things on Truth Social that said Putin used my very effective campaign slogan, common sense. I think we all believe in common sense, but he noticed that Putin had picked up that line. It's another stroke of flattery. I mean, you got to say Putin hasn't forgotten his lessons as a KGB agent maneuvering an operative around. And there are broader significances than just in Ukraine. This is a palpable harm to American national security, because what Hegseth and Trump did today was not only blow up the NATO position on Ukraine, they blew up a thing called the Belavasia Accords that Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia signed in December of 1991 that broke up the Soviet Union along the lines of the internal republics. So it means that not only is unprovoked aggression by Russia against Ukraine now okay, every other former republic in the Soviet Union is vulnerable to the same thing without any indication that the U.S. will do anything about it. And I think the people who are paying the closest attention to this outside of in Ukraine are in Beijing, where they see the United States unwilling to act against unprovoked aggression in the center of Europe. What are they thinking now about Taiwan?
If there is any chance that this works,
this dude need to be arrested immediately. You damn war criminal, you warmonger. He say the people who really paying attention to this is China. China is really paying attention to this because they see America is not willing to act. Bro, we done sent 200 billion. What you talking about? All kind of Americans done died in Ukraine, bro. All kind of NATO members done died in Ukraine, bro. What type of shit do you want us to do? Warmonger. You champion, you said weapons of mass destruction. This man said weapons of mass destruction was in Iraq. He wanted that war. Million people did. Now he say China. See, we won't stand with Ukraine. We still with them. They lost. The war is over. China sees this as we won't stand with Taiwan. Taiwan is a part of China, bro, and that's none of your damn business what's going on over there.
When you look at the dynamics here, do you believe that there's a way that this could be successful, that it could end this war that has gone on for as long as it has now?
Well, I think it'll be successful for Russia. It's a war of attrition. Russia's the bigger country. I think 3 years of mishandling by the Biden administration, dribbling out weapons assistance one system at a time after months of argument, prevented a really strategic response to the Russian invasion. So there's a lot of blame to go around here, but the surrender is going to be signed by Donald Trump.
Can I get you just before Trump swore in Tulsi Gabbard this afternoon in the Oval Office? Pam Bondi swore her in, but Trump was there obviously inside the Oval.
It's all Biden's fault, but the surrender is going to be signed by Trump. This is disgusting. This says CNN should be saying this. This man a war criminal, bro. He should be arrested along with Bush and Cheney. They bringing him on here like he's a sensible geopolitical analyst who can say something rational. War. He want war with every fucking body. Ukraine lost 1 million people. Teenagers being dragged off the street. She should ask him, who's going to fight the war? They dragging people off the streets and then see what his ass got to say. You talking about somebody standing with Ukrainians? Ukrainians are tired of this shit. Fuck the puppets y'all bringing on TV. Ukrainians are surrendering and running away. It's disgusting what America is talking about, bro. Fighting to the last damn baby over there. They even got women fussing, pregnant women. Man, we done seen videos of pregnant women as captured was fighting in Ukraine. That's a fact.
How does that presence as the director of national intelligence by Tulsi Gabbard, do you think, shape the Trump-Putin relationship in a second Trump term?
Well, I think Putin couldn't be happier. I tell you, they're drinking vodka straight out of the bottle in the Kremlin tonight. It was a great day for Moscow. I think Tulsi Gabbard's role as director of national intelligence is going to be extremely harmful to our national security. I think many allies are now going to think twice before they share intelligence with us. I think it'll impair our ability to gain confidence around the world. It was one of his worst nominations beyond a doubt.
Ambassador John Bolton.
See, now American allies, they don't want to share intelligence. Well, we know everything before they know it. What the hell are you talking about? We are the big intelligence agency. Who gives a damn about them puppets? You mad because she told the truth in Syria. You mad because she told the truth about what was going on in Ukraine. Damn, she still kissed Israel ass, but that ain't enough for you, is it?
Thank you for your perspective tonight.
Thank you.
Also here is the former Deputy Director of National Intelligence, Beth Sanner, and it's great to have you. You know what it's like to be in the meetings for these kinds of calls.
I don't want to hear from you, lady. I just want to hear from the big warmonger, John Bolton. I hear him cry. Putin won. It's a great day for Putin. Yeah, you damn right it's a great day for Russia, but it's a great day for peace. Peace won today, y'all. That's who won. That's who won. Now, we've been Trump. We've been having to kick him in the ass lately on this channel, but today he did what we asked him. We wanted him to end that fucking Ukraine war. Stop funding them Nazis. We don't like Nazis getting that type of money, So Europe is pissed. They saying he surrendered. That means he negotiated a good deal. When they say that means he negotiated the right thing.
Donald Trump says he and Russia's Vladimir Putin have agreed to hold talks to end the war in Ukraine. The US president confirmed he'd had a lengthy phone call with the Russian president and that they would direct their teams to begin negotiations immediately. President Trump also spoke with Ukraine's President Zelensky, but hasn't revealed what role Kyiv will play in talks.
As the 3-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine approaches, Donald Trump is making his bid to end the war. In a 90-minute phone call, the U.S. president said he and Russia's Vladimir Putin agreed to open peace talks immediately.
No, we had a great call, and it lasted for a long time, over an hour this morning. I also had with President Zelensky a very good call after that. And I think we're on the way to getting peace. I think President Putin wants peace, and President Zelensky wants peace, and I want peace. I just want to see people stop getting killed.
Ukraine's President Zelensky posted a picture of himself while on the phone with Trump. He said the call was meaningful and focused on the opportunities to achieve peace.
The conversation was long. We discussed many nuances, diplomatic, military, economic, and President Trump informed me of what Putin told him. We believe that America's power, together with us, together with all partners, is enough to pressure Russia and Putin towards peace.
Addressing the phone call, the Kremlin said Putin agreed with Trump that this was the time for the U.S. and Russia to work together. Still unclear is Ukraine's role in those negotiations, or what it would get in any potential peace deal.
What it would get.
Speaking at a NATO meeting in Belgium, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth signaled Ukraine would likely have to cede territory.
And do these people not know what peace means? They gonna get peace. They're gonna stop dying. They're gonna stop losing more land. They talk about what they're gonna get. Peace. Trump here to get them some peace. All the territory, that's gone. The trillions, that's gone. They don't need to worry about the trillions no more. The trillions, that's between Putin and Trump. And I guarantee you, Putin gonna throw them boys a little something. That's what got this deal to moving. The U.S., the U.S. is dangerous, devilish bastards. Once Putin let them people know, y'all gonna get a little something, man, on the black market for dirt cheap, shipped to some offshore bank accounts. Okay, that's all Trump asked for. What did Trump say, man? We need some of them resources, some of the minerals. Putin got them all, nigga. You got to talk to Putin about it.
Here to rule out membership in NATO.
We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. But we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective.
That's over.
The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement.
That's over.
Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops.
Without giving a timeline, Trump said a face-to-face meeting with Putin could take place in what he called...
That's all Putin asked for from the beginning. No NATO and demilitarization. He done already demilitarized Ukraine. Nigga, they can't fight no war against Russia no more unless U.S. and them keep arming them, but they demilitarized. All them people want to do is go home and work and try to put together the little life they got left and take care of the wounded. They demilitarized, but they still got the Nazis. That's one thing. Putin not going to let that go. They still going to have to do something with those Nazis, bro. That's real talk.
He called the not too distant future. He suggested a meeting with the Russian president, along with the Saudi crown prince in Saudi Arabia.
Well, let's pick through this with our Brussels bureau chief, Alexandra von Namen, who is at NATO headquarters in Brussels. Also with us is our Kyiv correspondent, Nick Connolly. Welcome both. Can we start with you, Alexandra, there in Brussels, and starting with NATO's reaction to these US plans to end this war in Ukraine?
Well, Phil, it appears that America's European allies were not consulted beforehand, and it seems that they were blindsided by the timing of this phone call, even though, of course, we have to say that all of them knew that something like that was coming, since US President Donald Trump promised to try everything that he could to end the war in Ukraine. And now we're hearing from many of them that they are satisfied with the fact that finally, as it seems, at least for now, Vladimir Putin is ready to negotiate, to start talks with Ukraine. However, many of the Europeans are also concerned what a role Ukraine will play in such talks. They want nothing to be negotiated without Ukraine's consent. And of course, they also want the Europeans to be at the negotiating table, because all talks that could take place, they will be also about Europe's security, or would matter to.
They don't matter. That's what they don't understand. They nobodies. The United Europeans say they want to be at the table. You should have sat down at the table. You shouldn't have waited on Trump to make the move. You should have done it your fucking self, puppets. Zelensky could have done it himself. He didn't need Trump. He didn't need EU. Now they upset because Trump said they nobody. And he can negotiate this shit without them. Now they're crying. The whole world sees you some puppets now. Trump has officially exposed all of those clowns as nobody to negotiate nothing with. Once he say, okay, the deal is done, then the deal is done. And they exposed for all of their populations that their leaders are nobody. They've been taking their money and laundering it, and now they don't even get to have no seat at the table. That's ultimate humiliation.
Europe's security. So this is the mood here right now. Maybe you can see behind me, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte just started his remarks here at the beginning of the second day of NATO meetings here in Brussels.
Okay. Nick Connolly in Kyiv, I would guess that it's not just NATO leaders who are blindsided. The US Defense Secretary also having tough words for Ukraine. NATO membership unrealistic, and suggesting they might have to give up bits of the country to Russia. How's that gone down?
Not well, Phil, even though it was expected. I think it's less about the content than about the framing. I think, we'd heard similar ideas coming from the Trump camp in the previous weeks and months. Ukraine has long spoken about the possibility of basically kicking the can on returning territories and leaving that to diplomacy sometime in the future. But it was more about the fact that you had these effusive words for Russia, for Putin, from Trump in his posts, in his remarks, the fact that there was a lot of talk of what Ukraine has to do in terms of hard compromise, hard choices, making, basically, going towards Russia rather than getting anything in return. And there was very little about what Russia has to do and give up in return. So that is obviously troubling from a Ukrainian perspective. I think there is a sense here in Kyiv that this is basically...
delusional. What would Russia have to give up? They have to give up kicking your ass. They have to stop kicking your ass. That's what they don't give up. To stop smashing you every goddamn day. Stop taking more land. They have to stop seizing all your shit. They're going to stop doing that. What the hell? See, this is pointless with these type of people talking. That's why Trump's showing them they nobody to talk about this type of shit. What you mean Russia giving up? Russia bringing peace to the table. That's what they bringing. They keeping everything they done took, because militarily they in control. And until the deal is sealed, they still gonna smash Ukraine every day. More gonna get took. And everything Zelensky said he wasn't gonna do, he's having to do. Puppets. No side.
The honeymoon between Trump and Putin, that Trump now in his first months in office thinks he can work his magic and somehow get Putin to offer up stuff that he wouldn't have to Biden. People here are skeptical that he actually will, that he actually is willing to come to some kind of compromise that the West and Ukraine can live with. So there is basically a kind of sense here that it's about the blame game, that Ukraine doesn't want to be blamed for talks eventually collapsing, that President Zelensky has to show maximum willingness to engage, in the hope that it's then Putin who walks away. Lots of analysts who've commented on these recent remarks, also looking at what Russian diplomats have said in recent days. Basically, it looks like Russia still wants to get what it wanted in February 2022, basically wants to keep everything it controls right now.
Revolutionary salute to our Queen Shang-Chi for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, Queen. Salute to you.
And later go for more of Ukraine. Sees Ukraine as a kind of illegitimate country. President Zelensky is an illegitimate leader, and also to push for a reduction in the size of Ukraine's army so that even outside NATO it won't be able to defend itself if Russia were to attack again. So there is a real skepticism here about Putin's motives, but a question of the blame game.
You talk about, Nick, you talk about Zelensky wanting to engage, but from the outside it looks very much like the American president and secretary of state saying not just to NATO chiefs and to Europe, but also to Ukraine, you'll take what you're given.
Certainly, you could interpret that from these words, but it has also to be said that Zelensky is not dealing with Trump for the first time, right? You'll think back to the first Trump presidency, that run-in they had over the whole Hunter Biden affair that led to the first impeachment against Trump. I think there's a sense that on the one hand, the Ukrainians are very conscious of the need to flatter Trump, to speak his language, to offer him deals, to show him that Ukraine is also able to give stuff that the Americans want and need rather than just asking for help. But at the same time, occasionally play hardball and play with some brinkmanship. After all, Trump is someone who does respect strength and doesn't necessarily respect people.
He said Ukrainians offered the Americans some stuff to show that they just don't want, they can give stuff. You offer the Americans resources that you no longer have. Putin has them. What type of nonsense do you think? Are you crazy? You don't even have the resources no more. How is that Ukraine showing America they're willing to give? That goes to show you they some damn scammers. They think we stupid.
People who, pander too much and give them everything you want. So it is a very nerve-wracking time for decision makers here in Ukraine. There's no question of that. But I think they're not going to, roll over immediately and, allow Trump to basically wind this down in a hurry on Moscow's terms. Question is, what will the Europeans do? Will the Europeans give the resources to allow Ukraine to kind of weather a period of difficult relations with the Trump White House when maybe money and weapons won't be as forthcoming as they have up till now?
Okay,
but, they don't really have many other options.
Let's pick up some of those points with Alexandra, because Alexandra, we heard the US Defense Secretary also telling European and non-European countries they have to do more to provide Ukraine's security. He also ruled out US boots on the ground in Ukraine. So this is looking more and more like NATO without the US.
Well, I mean, that is the true assessment when it comes to supporting Ukraine. And of course, the Europeans are saying that it's important, should there be any talks, to negotiate from the position of strength. So they are promising Ukraine to continue supporting them with military equipment, with ammunition, with all that is needed there on the front lines. However, we also have to be honest, and we heard from the German Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, this morning, admitting that Europe alone cannot provide Ukraine with enough weapons, with enough support to make a difference on the battlefield. So
I want people not actually wrapping their collective minds around the fact of what they're saying. That the European mighty powers, France, Britain, Germany, Spain, Italy, these magnificent powers, you can't support Ukraine militarily without the United States? All these governments done already collapsed. All these governments collapsed. All their leaders have been removed. The people want them gone. They say they can't support them militarily. What? See, these are a gang of thieves and bandits and bullies who got to try to bully on somebody because they're pathetic by themselves. Why Britain could just go do it. France, just go do it. Germany, or just y'all three go do it together. They can't. They'll be humiliated by Russia, be wiped out on the battlefield by Russia. They want Americans to die on behalf of European politics. That's disgusting.
The not having the U.S. support there, as it seems, or having only reduced supplies of American arms for Ukraine will be very difficult for Kiev. And then at the same time, when we talk about potential security guarantees, should there be a ceasefire, as you just mentioned?
Yesterday, man, North Korea will conquer Europe if they piss them off without nuclear. North Korea will conquer them busters. They better stop playing with speaking on Kim Jong-un like that. That's serious business. He already talking about going conquer Israel. He want a nuclear war with Israel. That's serious business. Kim crazy than mother. But these European powers, I'm glad we living in a day where they nobody. All that they got to go in the history books and live the good old days. They was terrorizing us and colonizing us, you know, and they don't want to go back too far because that's when we was on top. So they stopped at a specific point in time their glory days. But they're not living in no fucking glory days. They're living in the last of the days of ever thinking about they could win anything against anybody. And they're admitting right now, all together, all the European powers together can't fuck with Russia by themselves. This is a fact.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Hegseth made it very clear that there will be no U.S. boots on the ground. But what does that mean for the Europeans? They have been talking about potentially putting together an international peacekeeping force should there be a ceasefire. But without the U.S., that will be very challenging because, of course, with the U.S. Having the largest armed forces and modern capabilities in NATO, we have to say
that. I don't understand. Talking like that is why Trump talking about your ass going to become a state in the United States. I don't even like that colonizer talk. But when they keep saying without the U.S., that's why Trump come back and say, y'all are going to be a U.S. state if y'all motherfuckers can't do shit without us. If we got to subsidize your bullshit, then you are not a country. You are part of the United States. That's what Trump telling them. I don't like the colonizing tone of that. But I do like that he putting them puppets in their place and saying, why can't you do anything without us? Don't talk so tough no more if you can do nothing without the U.S. And here we go right here. Trump saying peace in Ukraine. They crying, well, without the U.S., we can't do shit. Well, you finish as sovereign states. It's over with.
That it's unlikely that there will be international peacekeeping force that could be there on the ground without the U.S. support, without air defense support, enables on the ground. So a lot of challenges there for the Europeans right now.
Okay, thanks for taking us through that. DW's Brussels Bureau Chief Alexandra von Namen there at NATO headquarters and Nick Connolly in Kyiv. Thank you both.
All right, we are going to have reaction ahead on these upcoming negotiations when we check in with the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. But let's begin with NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell.
Revolutionary salute to our Queen Yaya's kids for the donation of 5 gifted memberships to the cult figure community. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate you gifting those memberships to the revolutionaries. Now, revolutionaries, whoever get those memberships, do your best to try to keep the lights on in the house of revolution. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, family, salute. Now, let's hear some more of fake news, because this is very important, what they're saying about peace and how they're framing peace.
Kelly, good morning. Let's start right now with that conversation between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. How did this call come about, first of all? And what did the president have to say about what kind of role Ukraine would potentially have in these negotiations?
Good morning, Sam and Savannah. This is one of the most compelling relationships on the world stage, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. The president for quite a while had been reluctant to say whether he had spoken to him or not. And
These the
now
two big
out in the
bosses of the
open, he
world,
is
nigga. This is
discussing a
big.
lengthy meeting where they are planning for negotiations to end this war. What is a notable shift from the Biden years when the war began and President Biden assembled a coalition of NATO support to help Ukraine is the Biden administration would say nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Here, there's a real question about that.
That's a lie.
President Trump did speak to President Zelensky, but he has focused on the U.S. and Russia working toward a solution. And when he was specifically asked if Ukraine would be an equal partner, he called that a curious question and said that they need to work toward peace, and it's a war they never should have gotten into.
You see, they're so pissed off that Trump is a realist, that Trump not going to play their games. The U.S. president, nobody's a partner of the fucking U.S. That is so crazy. He's shown them to be the puppets that they is, and they can't stand it. He don't have time to pretend with Zelensky. Zelensky's going to take what they give him, and that's going to be it. They're going to get the peace, though. Ukraine is going to survive. Right now, he's negotiating Ukraine surviving as a nation. Zelensky blow this up. Trump just said last week, Ukraine might be a part of Russia. He just said that himself. He said that. They was pissed. So he letting Zelensky know, you accept this, or you might not even have a country, because I'll walk away and let Russia finish this thing.
Ignoring the obvious that Russia invaded Ukraine and they had no choice except to defend themselves. So President Trump and President Putin are planning to have conversations, in-person meetings, and to have members of their teams begin conversations this week in Munich, where Vice President Vance is representing the president at the Munich Security Council. So Vladimir Zelensky is saying Russia does not appear to be preparing for peace because they've launched additional attacks. And yet this is a call now to change.
Russia not preparing for peace because the war's still going on. In every war, the war don't stop till the peace agreement is signed. That's when the war stops. Every war, you go back on looking at any war. I looked at a bunch of them. The battlefield dictates the peace. See Zelensky crying, well, if Putin wants peace, tell him stop right now. Hell, you want Putin to stop? You sign that agreement that Trump and them putting on the table. And then it'll all go away.
The nature of this conflict and to see if there's a path toward resolution.
Kelly, a major question here is what these borders would look like should a peace deal be reached. I mean, Ukraine has been super clear since the start that any peace deal must reestablish their previous borders with Russia. But what is the Trump administration saying about that?
Yes, and Zelensky also wants to have some security protections so that they would not find themselves back in conflict at some future date. Zelensky and Ukraine do not want to give up territory.
That's what Russia is offering them. Security. This is people just act like we still. Russia offering them security. Russia letting them know we won't fuck you up if you don't try to ever be part of NATO. We won't destroy you if you don't go back to being neo-Nazis and saluting Hitler and the Banderites. You quit hailing Hitler and quit saying you're fighting on behalf of the white race. Who don't like that type of disgusting talk, man? He don't like that type of shit. He done battled those type of busters before. He took care of your granddaddy and them. You're going to get some peace. That is just security guarantee. No security if you want to be Nazis and you want to be part of NATO. That is the deal on the table.
The U.S. is saying, and President Trump is saying that has to be negotiated. And Pete Hegseth, speaking on behalf of the president, was saying that trying to go back to the original borders of Ukraine is unrealistic. That is certainly starting Ukraine at a deficit as these talks have yet to begin. So sort of pre-negotiating.
I mean,
that
I'm glad the Americans finally telling the truth. They tried that. We gave them all the advanced equipment you could ever have. They've lost almost 1 million people. They've tried to retake that territory and got humiliated, got devastated. They're going to write military doctrines on what the fuck the Russians did and what they did to Ukraine and all that advanced NATO equipment that the Russians seized and took back to Russia to look into it and re-engineered. All that shit going on. The best of the best. They got all that stuff. It's all theirs now. They got all the weapons NATO had except their nuclear submarines and their advanced airplanes. They got everything else. Anyway, so Trump would be stupid to even waste their time saying Ukraine get back the land that they've already tried to get back. They can't. That's not even realistic. Trump told you what we wanted. We want what we wanted in the beginning when we made Ukraine our puppet. It was all about resources. See, Trump got right to the meat and potatoes. I want resources. That's all we're looking for. So him and Putin is negotiating that. Zelensky, you finished, huh?
There should be no NATO ascension for Ukraine, something they very much want, something that the Biden administration had believed could be attainable at some point, and that the boundaries would not be the original sovereign territory of Ukraine. So these are key issues. Is there a way to negotiate land for peace and some other kind of protection? That may be what will unfold here, but it is certainly not starting in the way Zelensky and Ukraine had hoped it would.
Yeah, so many layers, obviously, to those negotiations. Kelly, while we have you, what can you tell us about the decision by a federal judge yesterday with so many of these federal workers right now?
Need this version of Europe. The United States doesn't need this version of Europe. This version of Europe is spent. What they need is a strong Europe, but a strong Europe doesn't exist, which is why they're looking at Russia. Hello, my friends. I hope you're all doing well. Today is Thursday, the 13th of February, and this is my first video update of the day. Yesterday, we have all been witnesses of a historic moment. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin held a 90-minute conversation over the phone, and both sides have described the result as one that is very positive and also very promising. At the same time, Pete Hegseth has delivered a speech to the Europeans, to the European Union, and all of this tells me a few things. Number one, Russia's red lines are staying red lines. They were accepted by the United States. Number two, Europe, the Europeans, will have to change fundamentally the way they do diplomacy and politics, or if they choose to still stay and stick by this current version of the European Union, by these Sorosist ideas, well, we might go the way of the dodo. Number three, the playground might very well soon move from Russia's border over to the Pacific. Now, why is this my conclusion of what happened yesterday? Well, it's about everything you're about to see in this episode. So let's begin with the conversation in between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And for that, I want us to go to Truth Social and see the statement that Donald Trump has released. And then we're going to move to Pete Hegseth's speech. I just had a lengthy and highly productive phone call with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. We discussed Ukraine, the Middle East, energy, artificial intelligence, the power of the dollar, and various other subjects. We both reflected on the great history of our nations and the fact that we fought so successfully together in World War II, remembering that Russia lost tens of millions of people, and we likewise lost so many. We each talked about the strengths of our respective nations and the great benefit that we will someday have in working together. But first, as we both agreed, we want to stop the millions of deaths taking place in the war between Russia and Ukraine. President Putin even used my very strong campaign motto of common sense. We both believe very strongly in it. We agreed to work together very closely, including visiting each other's nations. We have also agreed to have our respective teams start negotiations immediately, and we will begin by calling President Zelensky of Ukraine to inform him of the conversation, something which I will be doing right now. We could probably sit here and speculate around this statement for hours. However, in that case, we'll need popcorn, a cold drink, maybe food. So we're not going to do that in the interest of time. So what I got from this, the main conclusion, is the accent, the emphasis that Donald Trump is putting on the United States and Russia working together. I would ask a question here. It's not a serious question, by the way. What happened to nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine? What happened to Europe having to be at the negotiating table. I mean, that's what Kaja Kallas and Ursula von der Leyen and all of those people say. We cannot agree anything without Ukraine or without the European Union. Apparently, yes, it's possible. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin just agreed. The fact that this conversation was so positive, and now there's going to be a follow-up meeting in Saudi Arabia, and then Vladimir Putin will visit Washington, and Donald Trump will visit Moscow. This tells me that the main issues have already been ironed out in that conversation. What's about to follow from this point onwards are the little details. However, the main things have already been discussed and agreed upon. My friends, this is what I said, it's a historic moment. These conversations, they normally begin with the most pressing things, with the red lines. Because if people cannot agree on the red lines, well, in that case, there's not going to be any more follow-up meetings. This is why I'm saying that the Europeans would better pay attention. When I say Europeans, I don't mean the European people. I mean, of course, the leadership of the European Union. They need to pay attention to what's going on and change direction. However, I'm afraid it's just not going to be possible because the political class in Europe is completely incapable of accepting reality. They're still entrenched in a vision where Kamala Harris is the president of the United States, Russia's still the enemy, everything is just the same as it has been for the last 3 years. However, there's another part of that speech that raised my interest. Energy. Donald Trump talked with Vladimir Putin about energy. And this is important because on the 11th of February, just a few days ago, J.D. Vance has given a speech, I would say a very good speech. It's been so long, by the way, since I've seen a US vice president or president giving such a speech. No teleprompter, no earpiece, just to speak freely. It was really, really good. Point being, that speech was about AI. And one of the things J.D. Vance mentioned in that speech was energy. And he said certain governments, and he meant Germany and Europe as a whole, is that certain governments are deindustrializing and cutting back on the energy. This is a big no, he said. If you do that, you're not going to be able to power the future technologies that will shape the future, the world. It's as simple as that. Basically, he was saying you need to start building power plants, and you need to go back to the pipeline. The United States, they don't have an energy problem. They have plenty of energy of all kinds. Europe, on the other hand, well, Europe used to have the Russian energy, but no longer. This was a clear message sent even from 2 days ago by J.D. Vance to the Europeans. By the way, Ursula von der Leyen, she was also in the room, just a few feet away from J.D. Vance. He sent a clear message. You need to go back to the Russians or you might risk your future. That's really what he said. And one final thing I'll say about this before we move on to Pete Hegseth is basically the fact that Donald Trump said, I will call President Zelensky to inform him of what was discussed here. This is what I've been saying for the longest time, and I think the last time I said it was just a few days ago. Donald Trump will not consult with either Zelensky or Ursula von der Leyen or anybody in this space. The conversation will be between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and that is where the conversation will end. The European Union and Zelensky, they will be invited at one of these meetings in between Trump and Putin, but not in order to consult, but just to sign the dotted line. What I mean by that is somebody from Ukraine, Zelensky or no Zelensky, will have to sign whatever the conclusion is, and the Europeans will have to sign the money that they will have to spend for maintaining the security of Ukraine moving forward. This is what's going to happen, and this is exactly what started happening yesterday. Europe and Ukraine were not at the table, and they won't be. Now, let's move on to Pete Hegseth, because this is also extremely important and part of the same bigger picture. Pentagon chief says Ukraine's NATO ascension and return to pre-2014 borders are unrealistic. The new U.S. Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, said on the 12th of February that a return to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is not a realistic goal and that the U.S. does not consider NATO membership for Ukraine a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement of the war. Like I just said, Russia's red lines have stayed red lines. And I know a few voices already started to speculate, saying, well, Donald Trump will just promise Vladimir Putin that Ukraine will not join NATO for the next 4 years whilst he's still president. However, who knows what might happen in the future? That's not going to be the case, my friends. It's definitely not going to happen. Vladimir Putin already said that any sort of peace negotiations, any sort of written agreements would have to be ironclad. Not susceptible to interpretation, not with an expiry date. They will have to be permanent. Russia's security is not up for discussion. Those are the statements made by Vladimir Putin, and these are the statements made by Pete Hegseth. So I'll let you put two and two together. Quote, we will only end this devastating war and establish a durable peace with a realistic assessment of the battlefield. We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine, but we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. I don't think we need to elaborate too much on what Pete Hegseth has just said, because it's obvious. Russia will get to keep all the territories that it currently has under its control. The only question, and this is a big question, is how much of those territories? Because if we look at there's the 4 regions, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Russia doesn't have full control of these regions. I mean, I think in Luhansk, they control about 98% or something like that. However, in Donetsk, there's still the 2 big strongholds where Ukraine is still very much entrenched in Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. Point being, when this is over, whatever Russia has on the battlefield, they will get to keep. But obviously, that begs the question, when will this conflict be over? Because if Vladimir Putin wants the entirety of the Donetsk region, for example, that in that case, this conflict, at least the hot part, will not end until Russia gets that territory. Unless Mr. Green T-shirt says, well, you know what, let's spare us the trouble and just conclude it right here and now. Also, that reminds me of something I've covered yesterday. The Green T-shirt latest idea with trading Kursk for something in Ukraine. That's just not going to happen. By the way, Dmitry Peskov has responded to that statement with a one-liner. This is impossible. A very short and sweet answer to the Green T-shirt. No, that dream of yours is not going to come to fruition, just like none of your other dreams have come to fruition. Let's continue with Pete Hegseth. The Pentagon chief added that chasing this illusionary goal would only prolong the war and cause more suffering. In this context, he said, the United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, he added, any security guarantees must be backed by capable European and non-European troops. So, no NATO membership for Ukraine, Russia gets to keep all of those territories. This doesn't exactly look anything like the victory plan that we so much talked about in the fall of 2024. However, Pete Hegseth is saying that it's going to be Europe's responsibility, as in the financial responsibility, to sponsor the peacekeepers, the European peacekeepers, and also the non-Europeans. By the way, by non-Europeans, he doesn't mean the Americans. What he meant is that those non-European troops will most likely have to be from the BRICS nations, because Russia will never accept having a larger army of peacekeepers that are all from adversary states. Let's just call them that way. Of course not. Those peacekeepers will have to be a mix in between the BRICS nations and Europe. However, the United States, they're not going to sponsor those peacekeepers. And by the way, the costs will be astronomical. Do you know that one mission, one of those peacekeeping missions in Africa that involves a couple of thousand soldiers, do you know it costs about $100 million a year? These costs will be astronomical, and all of them will have to be supported by the European Union. So good job in Brussels. You've been tremendous. Quote, if these troops are deployed as peacekeepers in Ukraine at any point, they should be deployed as part of a non-NATO mission, and they should not be covered under Article 5. There also must be robust international oversight of the line of contact. not having these peacekeepers covered under NATO's Article 5 is a very smart move, because otherwise, bad actors, I'm sure they would be inclined to use these peacekeepers as a tripwire in order to go back to the hostilities and, God knows, just go on an even larger scale in their conflict between Russia and the West. So I think this is a very smart and very much needed move. However, this is everything that the Ukrainska Pravda article tells us about Pete Hegseth's speech. However, there's a lot more he said, and for that I want us to go to CNN because there's a very important paragraph that I want to read out to you. But Hegseth was still jarring. He formalized Trump's demand for alliance members to spend 5% of GDP on defense and said the United States would prioritize its growing clash with China and the security of its borders over Europe's. Quote, the United States will no longer tolerate an imbalanced relationship which encourages dependency, said the new Pentagon chief who was wearing a Stars and Stripes pocket square. And this is why I said at the beginning of the video that the playground will very soon move into the Pacific, close to China. Also, I've mentioned J.D. Vance's speech about AI from 2 days ago. Well, in that speech, he was referring a lot to a bad state, a bad actor. And he clearly meant China without explicitly saying it. Regardless of how we feel about it, these are the facts. The United States will now look at China. The great power politics is back in play. And this is the position of the United States. And this is what Europe needs to understand. Again, by Europe, I mean the European Union. The European Union is not relevant in this context one bit. For the Americans, let me put it this way. For the United States, Russia is far more valuable than Europe at this point in time, because the United States cannot take on China without Russia, or at the very least, without having Russia as their enemy. It's just not possible. Europe, on the other hand, well, I'm afraid the people in Brussels have driven Europe into irrelevance. And not just irrelevance, Europe at this very point in time, we have a legitimacy problem. Let's take a look at these big nations. France, for example. Macron is hanging by his fingernails. We look at Germany. Well, I mean, Germany's political future is anybody's guess at this point. Let's take a look at the UK. Now, I know the UK is no longer in the EU, but they're still part of this space, and it was their decision to insert themselves into this conflict in Ukraine. The situation is not looking good here. There's not a single country of the big ones in Europe who has it smooth. They just don't. And this is the result of the bad policy over the last few years. And like I said, just to go back to the initial train of thought, the United States doesn't need this version of Europe. This version of Europe is spent. What they need is a strong Europe, but a strong Europe doesn't exist, which is why they're looking at Russia. Because the Europeans, the European Union, is currently, unfortunately, incapable of supporting even itself. Let's move on. Ukraine wants and will be NATO country, says Ukraine's defense minister in response to Pentagon chief's remarks. Let's just all take a moment for that to sink in. The United States is telling you, no, you're not going to be a NATO member. And then what does Mr. Umerov say? Well, of course we're going to be a NATO member. What are you talking about? My response to you is that we will be a NATO member.
Can't accept the reality.
I mean, speaking of denial of reality. Quote, we have to get used to any kind of statements. Our position has always remained unchanged. We want to be a NATO country. We will be a NATO country, Umerov stressed. He just doesn't get it. He thinks that Pete Hegseth is just playing around and making political statements which are backed by any sort of substance. He thinks that he's still dealing with the people in Brussels. Only the people in Brussels would say something that's not backed by either intent or a fact. I'm afraid that's not the case here, Mr. Umerov.
Revolutionary salute to my brother Out of Bondage for the donation to the war chest. Revolutionary Red Life. Absolutely appreciate the love. He say salute my revolutionary family. Salute to you, brother. Appreciate the love. Salute.
Might need to readjust your reality. It's incredible. Quote, we're maintaining our defense potential and we're capable of doing so. We have our own priorities and we draw all conclusions together with our people, he said. He added that the meetings in the Ramstein format are centered on defense assistance, while all political matters will be discussed not by defense ministers, but at a different level. The more he speaks, the smarter he looks. He's just called Pete Hegseth as not relevant because, this is not for Pete Hegseth to say. This will be discussed at another level, as in between Zelensky and Trump. Mr. Umerov is either really this smart or he's been pushed by the green t-shirt to make all of these sort of statements and he's just saying those without believing it. Either one of these two is not a good reflection. Imagine what the United States must be thinking looking at his statements. Like, we want to be a NATO member and we will be a NATO member. Well, no, you're not. We've just told you you're not going to be one. No, but we want to be because we can be a NATO member. Let's move on because now we're going to get to reactions from around the world, from our usual suspects, to see how they reacted at the Trump-Putin conversation, Pete Hegseth statements. Oh, grab your popcorn for this one because you need it. Trust me. Trump's plan for Ukraine, a great deal for the Kremlin, Kiev's backers say. U.S. Senator Adam Schiff, a longtime Trump critic who was the lead prosecutor in the Republicans' first impeachment trial, called the president, quote, a great deal maker, all right, for the Kremlin. Quote, today, President Trump called our enemy, Russia, before calling our ally, Ukraine, Schiff said on social media. Continuing the quote, meanwhile, his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, ruled out a future for Ukraine in NATO and the restoration of Ukrainian sovereignty over its own lands. Let's not mince words about what this represents. A surrender of Ukraine's interest and our own, even before negotiations begin. Adam Schiff, in this context at the very least, he's the voice of the US deep state saying, well, Trump has called Putin our enemy instead of Ukraine our ally. I've explained this at length. Ukraine doesn't have allies. How do we know that? Well, it's because Ukraine is fighting on its own on the battlefield. The United States was never Ukraine's ally. They were the puppet master, but not the ally. Nobody has been Ukraine's ally. Now, let's look at the reaction that's from Europe. Oh, I know you've been dying to see this one. The EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, released a late-night statement on behalf of the Weimar Plus group of nations, which includes France, Poland, Germany, Spain, Italy, and the UK, reacting to Trump's pronouncements. Quote, Ukraine's independence and territorial integrity are unconditional. As peace talks begins, the statement posted by Kallas said, quote, our priority must now be strengthening Ukraine and providing robust security guarantees. Just like Mr. Umerov, Kaja Kallas also cannot accept what's about to happen. They simply can't accept reality. You can only imagine, when Kaja Kallas received this news, they're saying in the middle of the night, she said, well, I can't go to sleep, not like this. I need to put out a statement to show some support for Ukraine. Where's my Ukrainian pin? Well, I'm afraid there's not enough pins in the world, not enough statements in the world, Ms. Kaja Kallas, that will change reality. That's just a fact. Marko Mihkelson, chair of the Estonian Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee, cautioned, quote, today might go down in history as a dark day for Europe, adding that it's time for European leaders to take our fate into our own hands. I agree with Mr. Mihkelson. I've also been saying for the longest time, Europeans need to take their fate into their own hands. However, not in the context that Mr. Mihkelson is suggesting. Basically, he's actually calling for a resistance. Like, no. Let the United States do what they need to do, but Europe, we will keep sponsoring this. That is what he's saying. And for that, I don't have any sort of sympathy. Europe cannot do this by itself. Even Zelensky knows that. He said it just a couple of days ago, that security guarantees from Europe without the United States don't mean jack nothing. So why is Mr. Mihkelson convinced that Europe can't do anything about it? Like I said, Europe has multiple problems right now. Monetary problems, legitimacy problems, political shakiness. It's the situation in Europe is the worst it's been in the longest time. Let's go on. Trump says he backs Ukraine, but early concessions to Russia spark concerns, Reuters tells us. Quote, why is the Trump administration giving Putin gifts, Ukrainian land, and no NATO membership for Ukraine before negotiations even begin? McFaul asked on social media site X. Quote, I've negotiated with the Russians. You never give up anything to them for free. First of all, I am sure that Donald Trump hasn't given anything up for free. Second of all, it was the United States, the previous administrations, going back to 1993, who have concocted all of this. This conflict was a proxy war instigated by the United States. So, Mr. McFaul, do you know the principle of taking ownership of your own mistakes? Or do you want to be compensated even when you make mistakes? I think that's the mindset of these people. Regardless of what they do, they should always be compensated. Now, I'm also certain that in between Russia and the United States, in between Putin and Trump, there has been some conversation. I mean, the conversation lasted 90 minutes. Details that we will not know either ever or for a very, very long time. So Mr. McFaul should not speak about what might have or what might not have taken place in that conversation, because we simply don't know. Quote, no NATO membership, no boots on the ground, sounds like abandoning Ukraine. Former Lithuania Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis posted on X in response to Hegset's comments, which come ahead of the Munich Security Conference for political and military leaders later this week. Quote, delegates are flying to Munich not to negotiate, but to deliver Zelensky the bad news. Funny enough, that sounds exactly like what I said just a few days ago. The United States, during the Munich Security Conference, will only be there just to deliver the bad news to the Europeans. I mean, Mr. Gabrielius Landsbergis says that the US will deliver the bad news to the green T-shirt. Oh, no. It's the green T-shirt and people like you, Mr. Gabrielius, because you don't seem to understand what's about to happen. You're all denying reality. But my friends, I'll leave this episode here. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And
war is going real bad for NATO. Like we said in the beginning, it was hyper tight. Couldn't even beat the Taliban. Trying to crouch look.
On February 12th, in response to questions from journalists of the British newspaper The Guardian, the head of the Kiev regime, Volodymyr Zelensky, stated that the Ukrainian army is present in the Kursk region solely to trade this territory for occupied Ukrainian lands during upcoming negotiations with Russia. Zelensky stressed that Kiev is ready for negotiations with Moscow, but only from a position of strength. Well, my dear truth seekers, it seems that this political clown is really under the influence of some prohibited substances.
Yeah, cocaine.
There is simply no other explanation for such stupid statements by this dead man walking. Even Western experts with pro-Ukrainian views cannot understand how Kiev can negotiate with Moscow from a position of strength if the Ukrainian army rapidly retreats in all directions of the front, including the Kursk region. Moreover, on February 12, the representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Maria Zakharova, officially stated that Moscow would never allow Kiev to consider Kursk as some bargaining chip in the upcoming negotiations, and that all Ukrainian army units would be completely destroyed in this Russian region. The fact that the situation of the Ukrainian army is rapidly deteriorating in all directions of the front, including the Kursk region, is confirmed by both war correspondents and numerous Western analytical centers. By the way, a few minutes ago, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation published another footage of the destruction of Ukrainian and NATO soldiers in the Kursk region. It is reported that on February 11th, Russian Marines from the elite 155th Brigade of the Pacific Fleet engaged in battle with a unit from the 47th Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Army, near the settlement of Lebedevka. According to numerous sources in the Russian Defense Ministry, there were about 100 soldiers in this Ukrainian unit. Furthermore, there were also numerous British, American, Polish, and Canadian mercenaries among these Ukrainian soldiers. Sources within the Russian military confirmed that many of these so-called mercenaries were active servicemen from NATO allied countries. It is reported that after a 30-minute engagement near the settlement of Lebedevka, Ukrainian and NATO soldiers retreated with heavy losses to the suburb of Nikolsky village and hid on the territory of a local pig farm. The Russian Marines, using radio communications, repeatedly asked them to lay down their weapons and surrender. However, instead of surrendering, the Ukrainian and NATO soldiers opened heavy fire on the Russian Marines. In this regard, it was decided to strike at the territory of this pig farm with Tornado-S multiple launch rocket systems. The footage clearly shows how the missiles of these multiple launch rocket systems accurately hit the structures of this pig farm, where Ukrainian and NATO soldiers were hiding. Later, the commander of a Marine infantry unit with the call sign Bullet stated that as a result of this missile attack, all enemy personnel were destroyed. According to him, about 100 enemy soldiers were killed. Among these soldiers were not only Ukrainian nationalists, but also British, US, Polish, and Canadian citizens.
A French-made Scalp missile was captured and deactivated by Russia near the Kursk border, where the tandem hollow point missile was found in a snowdrift in a district of the region. Russian channels reported on February 12, 2025, learning from the Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations. Russian engineers in the midst of a dismantling session released their video, showing demining officers defusing the 2.3 billion euro missile fired by France for Ukraine, which was now taken over by Russia. This is a new blow to Emmanuel Macron as the Russian army records success after success. Now the Russian government has revealed that the French Scalp missile was seized intact. The footage on February 11 showed a sapper team from the Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations defusing a Scalp cruise missile, where the ministry said that the French-made Scalp missile was successfully disabled in the Russian border region of Kursk. Ukraine has used Scalp missiles on Russian territory for the first time, which Moscow says means that the use of Western long-range missiles on Russian territory would mean that such an attack would only be possible if intelligence from NATO satellites were used, namely if NATO participates directly in the conflict. Russia destroyed the Scalp when they arrived, and may have displayed one in Moscow after getting all its technological secrets, as a testament to France's hostility towards Russia, the report wrote.
one of the things is that I can have no financial interest in this whatsoever, and nothing happens for free. So it's a subscription-based service to keep the Russian end, which has nothing to do with the government, nothing to do with big media. It's a Russian citizen who is collaborating with me on a private basis, but that person needs to pay interpreters and pay the bills. So it's a subscription-based service, but it's not that much. And you're not going to get this anywhere else. There's no other endeavor like this today on the internet to bring Russian voices, Russian perspective to an American audience through an American filter, American prism. So the Russia House with Scott Ritter on Telegram. Encourage everybody to go and give it a shot.
All right. ScottRitter.com, and check that out regularly. Share that on all your social media platforms. That's where you can find all of Scott's work and everything he's up to. And of course, you can donate there to help Scott keep going. All right, Scott. Okay, the little Trump and Putin, I mean, the small potatoes, the small fries have talked. Now let's listen to the big voices. Schultz rejects dictated peace for Ukraine as Europe reels after Trump-Putin call. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, the big guy, on Thursday said a deal to end the Ukraine war should not be imposed on Kiev as European leaders warn of security implications, blah, blah, blah. You keep going. They scrambled, sent shockwave through, okay. And they say the next task is to ensure that there is no dictated peace, which means they got to put Trump and Putin in their places. Ukraine has to be closely involved in everything that happened about Ukraine. Now, here's the interesting thing. So now, if you ask me, and this is a bad move for Europe, but okay, it's a power showdown. I had Dmitry Polyansky on the other day, and he basically said, I like the way I like the way Galloway puts it. He says, we're not going to talk to the monkey, we're going to talk to the organ grinder, right? We're not going to talk to Europe. The Russians forget Europe, forget Zelensky. As the Russians say, he's illegitimate, forget him. We're talking to the US. That's where a deal's going to be made, right? Now the Europeans come up, oh no, they're standing their ground. There will be no dictated peace. They must be involved. Ukraine must be involved. So now we got to stand off. And knowing the way Trump thinks, that's a bad move for them to say, I'm going to stand up against Trump and tell him he ain't. Just knowing the way he reacts to things, that's, to me, from my perspective, the worst possible thing that they could say. Anyway, go on, Scott.
Well, it's actually the best possible thing they could say, because it brings clarity to the issue. Let's just be straight up honest. This is a war that was brought thrust upon Russia by the United States, by Europe, by Ukraine. It was a war of design, and the purpose was to undermine and ultimately destroy Russia, the Russian Federation, to strategically defeat it. But in the United States, what you had is, a leadership that had been hijacked by, Cold War era thinking, Russophobia, not even Cold War era Russophobia, because Russophobia didn't have sway during the Cold War. We were very clear on, who the Russians were, very honest about that. And it's only later when we had to lie to ourselves and to NATO about the threat posed by Russia, because Russia didn't pose a threat to anybody in the post-Cold War era. That's where Russophobia comes in, where we manufacture a case against the Russians. But that was unsustainable. It was always going to be unsustainable. And you and I have been talking about it. I mean, you bring it up. We broached it in December 2021 about the unsustainability of trying to sanction Russia. And I've been saying from the get-go, Russia will win this war. There is no other outcome possible. And here we are. Now we have a group of people in the United States who have come to political power, and they have put forward a new way of thinking, that Russia isn't the threat to Europe or the West, that this Ukraine conflict was wrong. I mean, look, Trump, well, actually, it was Pete Hesmet, the Secretary of Defense, in the meeting at Ramstein Contact Group, said some amazing things, such as Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. If NATO and the United States had recognized that reality, or at least been honest about that reality, this war never would have happened. He also said that Ukraine will not get back its 2014 borders. And Trump has even further said that, the territories that Russia wants, Putin has made it clear that there won't be peace without that. So that's probably what Russia's going to get. I mean, there's just clarity across the board right now. Clarity that Europe was never going to allow to be, presented. Europe is the problem, not the solution. And the fact of the matter is, Trump and Putin are going to, create the conditions for peace, and those conditions are going to be dictated to Trump by Putin. There will be diplomacy involved. Of course, this will be papered over. It won't be so blatant. But even Trump, it's an amazing thing to have a president of the United States actually put himself in the shoes of his adversary and think of things from their perspective. And that's how he's approached this. He said, well, from the Russian perspective, this is that. From the Russian perspective, the Russians don't want this war to end and only happen, and come back 6 months from now. Russia's not going to agree to a ceasefire. They don't want that. It's an amazing thing when you actually do as John F. Kennedy encouraged everybody to do back, if you remember his American University speech in June of 1963. He said, put yourself in the shoes of the Soviets, understand where they're coming from. Well, Trump has done that. And one of the most amazing things is that the man who was helping push a European perspective on this conflict, Keith Kellogg, is not part of the delegation. He's not part of the solution. I'm beginning to think that Keith Kellogg was a construct of Trump to go out there and absorb all of the bad ideas so that Trump could show everybody just how bad these ideas are. Keith Kellogg was supposed to present his 100-day plan for peace at the Munich Security Conference. That got canceled, and he got sent to NATO and Europe, and he's disappeared. Meanwhile, there's a 90-minute phone call that he wasn't part of, and Trump and Putin have set forth, a vision on how to go forward. We now have identified the peace delegation: Marco Rubio, the National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, the director of the CIA. These are the people that are going to be the special envoy for Middle East peace, by the way, not for Ukraine conflict, because he's shown himself to be competent. These are the people that are going to meet with the Russians. And I think that it's, the proof is in the pudding. We won't know until it's done. But this is the best possible place we could be today. In Europe just doesn't matter. I mean, it's interesting headlines, but no one cares what Scholz thinks. No one cares what Mark Rutte thinks. Nobody cares what Kallas thinks. Nobody cares what von der Leyen thinks. Nobody cares what anybody in Europe thinks. They simply don't matter. They don't have a vote. They don't have a say. And if they're not careful, and this is what you brought up, the demise of the European Union and NATO will take place on a much tighter schedule than is envisioned. European Union's dead. Trump has already killed it. They just don't recognize that. NATO is dead. Trump has already killed it. NATO just hasn't recognized that. But if they want to play stupid games, then they win stupid prizes. For instance, the moment European Union starts talking about sanctioning the United States, I just want to remind them where they get their liquid natural gas from. And what happens if the United States decides to divert all of the tankers headed towards Europe to the Pacific market? And now you're a prisoner of the spot market. Instead of paying 4 times the going rate for natural gas, you're going to be paying 10 times the going rate. And guess who you're going to be buying it from? Russia, on the spot market. The Europeans are just the dumbest people on the face of the earth about security, about Europe, about anything. They don't understand the reality that exists today. They think somehow they're still back 10 years ago when the United States was on their side, when the United States was the shield to protect them so they could be brave behind them. The United States was the Rottweiler behind which the Chihuahuas got to bark. We're gone, and now you're facing a Russian German Shepherd that wants to eat you. So maybe it's time to stop barking.
Right. And here's the thing about it. The insanity of where Europe is, because they're like, all right, we're going to stand up against Russia. And by we, they meant the U.S. is going to, do all of the stuff against Russia. Right. So look, the U.S., a new administration comes in, and basically a lot of people feel like I feel that these neocons didn't represent the U.S. They represented this crazy faction of, ideologues, right? They kind of hijacked the U.S. foreign policy. They lied to the people. They propagandized the people into going along with their fascist, crazy ideology of the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which died, I think, on January 20th. But my point is, so they align themselves with this lunatic faction of ideologues who are now out of power. So they're like, we're going to stand up to Russia. Okay. A new administration comes in and says, that's done. We're not doing it anymore. So what are they going to do? We're going to stand up to the US. You're going to stand up to Russia. We're standing up to China. We forgot, but they went over to China to tell them a thing or two. They're standing up to the US. So now this little chihuahua is going to stand up to. There are 3 world powers. Count them, 3. Exactly 3. And the European Union, who has no natural resources to speak of, who can't feed themselves realistically, they don't have the things they need to survive. And now they're going to stand up and dictate to all 3 world powers. People, they got to look at the mirror and say, any of the 3 powers, any single one of the 3 powers would be bad. To say you're going to stand up, it's cataclysmic. Any of them, Russia, China, or the US, God forbid all 3, could snatch any number of rugs out from under Europe and turn it into the equivalent of Haiti overnight. And let me add this, but at some point, I know it has to come to this. It has to come to this. When Trump says, I got to deal with Putin. Putin says, yeah, it's kind of a deal. Let's just say, I did not say they can or can't get a deal, but it gets to the point where they say, we got a deal. I'm ready to sign. I'm ready to sign. What the hell is Europe going to say? No, not going to happen. Ukraine, no, not going to happen. And I guess Trump at that point says, all right, well, go ahead and handle it yourself. Have a nice day. I don't know. But we need to get to that point where somebody calls Europe's bluff, and Europe is dragging themselves up to the point where their bluff gets called.
One of the interesting things that's happening in this iteration of the Trump administration is the rapid dismantlement of the deep state. When Trump came into office in his first term, he was a prisoner of the deep state. He talked about draining the swamp, but he had no clue how to go about doing it because he himself admits he didn't understand how government worked. And I think he bought into the artifice that most Americans have bought into, that government is, while there might be inefficiencies, government ultimately wants to do what's best for you. Turns out, though, that what happened is these neocons have hijacked every aspect of the government to create this fraudulent funding mechanism to sustain bad policy and to enrich a political and economic elite. Everything about the U.S. government is fraudulent. Everything about the U.S. government is fraudulent. Every contract that's put out there, everything. It's not designed to achieve any good result. What they do is they take an issue and they build a contract vehicle around it in which they start dispersing money to people who have no, say in solving this problem. It's just an enrichment vehicle. And people can be critical of Doge all they want. Doge is destroying this deep state enterprise as we speak. And how that relates is everything we do with NATO, with Europe, is part of this corruption. NATO is a employment vehicle for European political and economic elites. NATO stopped being a defensive military alliance a long, long time ago. All NATO does today is create bureaucracies, and then they create funding mechanisms, and Europe wants America to pay for that. And we were willing to pay for that for a while, as long as we benefited from that. But we're not now, because push has come to shove, and Europe has postured itself, believing that they stand for something, postured themselves to be an opponent of Russia, Russia's adversary of Europe. Well, that has to be to sustain the NATO model. In order to sustain the NATO model, they need Russia as the adversary. And the United States has taken a look at that, Trump. But remember, Trump doesn't operate in a vacuum. There's been people out there like me, like you, and others who have been calling this out from day one, saying this is corruption, this is bad, this is going to lead us down the wrong path. But it's hard to go up against for instance, how do we compete with Reuters? Reuters took tens of millions of dollars to lie. Their contract says you are to lie to the American people. You are to create an alternative reality. Reuters, a news organization paid by the United States government to lie to the American people. Every single media outlet in America, mainstream media, operates the exact same way. Why do you? And we knew this, Carlin. We knew this when we saw. You've seen those funny clips. It's funny when you watch it, but it's actually sad. Where all across the country, the two hosts, the good-looking man and the woman, and they all say the same thing. Vladimir Putin is a dictator headed down the path of evil. And then the next person, well, Vladimir Putin is a dictator headed down the path of evil. Vladimir Putin, a dictator headed down the path of evil. They're reading from the same script. Why? They've all been paid to do so. And it's very difficult for us trying to promulgate fact-based truth to compete against that because they overwhelm you. Well, that's being dismantled right now. That money is being pulled out. These people will no longer be paid to be able to lie to the American people. And as a result, there's a breath of fresh air coming in, and it's shocking to see what is happening. We've been lied to about Europe. We've been lied to about NATO. We've been lied to about everything. We've been lied to about Russia. It turns out Russia is probably the most reasonable nation on the European continent. The most realistic nation, the one that wants peace more than anybody else. But we weren't allowed to realize that or talk about it because, my God, the second you said Russia, you're a Putin agent. You can see.
Revolutionary salute to our brother Golden Mask for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, family. Salute to you.
A little tight. Scott Ritter, a paid agent of Vladimir Putin. My God, a paid agent. I got paid $250 per article to be published in RT without any editorial interference at all. It turns out, in retrospect, that RT was the most honest, fact-based news outlet, together with Sputnik, out there reporting on this issue, bar none. And I challenge anybody to prove me wrong. You can't. It was the most intellectually honest, the most morally grounded, and they didn't pay you to lie. It turns out that everybody who was calling me a paid Russian agent was a paid agent of the United States government. Now, that's okay if you want to say I'm a paid agent of the United States government, but no, they were pretending that they were an independent media. Independent media doesn't exist in America if it's mainstream. You took the frickin' dollar. You corrupted yourself. Garland Nixon and others, Wilmer Leon, these are the handful of purists out there. I'll count myself in there. You don't have to agree with me. You can disagree with me. That's your prerogative. But if you say I took the Russian money to tell lies and spout Russian propaganda, I'll knock your goddamn teeth out. Okay? I didn't. I told the truth, nothing but the truth. So help me God. The only people lying to you is the mainstream media, and they've lied to you about everything, including Europe. You're going to find out how fraudulent NATO is. You're going to find out how fraudulent the European Union is. The European Union is literally a vehicle to empower the European elite with jobs, sinecures, and all they do is undermine democracy. Look at what they've done in the Republic of Georgia. That is a textbook where I take the Yankee dollar. Hey, I shouldn't read your chat because I'm in a fighting mood today, man. I'm telling you what, anybody thinks that they can take me on, come to Del Mar, New York. We'll pick any street corner you want, and I will kick your ass. I don't care how young you are. You can bring 5 of you. Line them up, one by one by one. I'm in a fighting mood because the reason why I'm in a fighting mood is, it's so freaking obvious what's happened here. God, we were right the whole time. We knew we were right, but everybody's being told we were wrong. Everybody's being told that we were somehow compromised. There was nothing compromised about us. Again, we are human. Can we have bad analysis? Sometimes. I'd say we do pretty good because we're honest in our approach. But we were the only honorable, and the people we work with, the circle of people we're in, I call the family of podcasts, we're the only honest actors out there. Everybody else is corrupt. And what we're seeing with Europe today is the corruption. And just like the deep state has to be dismantled, in order to solve the problem in Europe, the European Union has to go, and it will go. NATO has to go, and it will go. These people, what we're seeing, all these, Schultz and Macron and these are the pathetic holders on who are sitting there demanding relevancy when they deserve none. They aren't relevant. Daddy has spoken, and Daddy's name is Donald Trump. Europe was told in the last Trump thing, 2%. All you had to do is come up with 2% GDP and you'd make daddy happy. And you couldn't do that. And now you got yourself in a war in Ukraine. And daddy says it's going to cost you 5%. And none of you can make that happen. So daddy's going to pull the bank of daddy gone. And now you got to step up if you want to be big and bad and independent. And you got to pay 10 to 15%, which none of you can do. And therefore, you are basically the equivalent of the 30-year-old kid living in mommy's basement. And mommy said, I ain't paying your rent anymore. I'm not buying your food. I'm not paying for your internet. You've been telling me how adult you are and grown up you are. Time to fly, baby, fly. And Europe's been kicked out of the nest and they can't make it. They can't make it. And so, and that's the reality. Europe can't be what Europe wants to be. They could have. They were smart. Cheap Russian gas certainly sounds good right now. But all the people who would put the political capital into, the Russophobic policies of isolating Russia won't let that happen. Their days are numbered. They will fall. And when they fall, you'll see one by one, the nations of Europe will turn to Russia and say, bring on the gas, bring on the oil, bring on whatever. The Baltic states, the genius Baltic states, we're going to decouple from the Soviet electric grid. Well, it's the Russian electric grid, but that's okay. And they hung up, goodbye, Lenin. Wow, you guys are smart. What happened? 120% rise in electric prices overnight. It's going to keep going up. You can't afford it, guys. You're so stupid. Germany, we're going to be liberated from Russian gas. Well, you're dead. Not only that, we're gonna de-risk from China. De-risk. That doesn't mean de-link. It means de-risk. Last time I checked, it was Chinese companies coming in trying to buy VW because VW is going out of business because of your stupid policies. Europe hasn't done anything right, and they can't do anything right because Europe stands for nothing. Europe existed to please America, and now we have an administration that says we don't want to be pleased by you anymore. You become too much of a burden. Fly, little birdie, fly. And this is like the bird being kicked out of the nest that can't fly. They're going to hit the ground and we're going to find their pathetic little bird corpse on the corner of the street getting eaten by a mouse.
Yeah, at some point. I mean, at some point, if Trump, I put it like this, he's talking to Putin and they're like, hey, they're being pals and blah, we can get a deal, everybody. I feel your pain. I feel your pain. Hey, man, I need this. Yeah, I understand. Hey, let's get a deal. So let's say they're working towards the deal. At some point, the Europe's, they're going to get their ticket punched. We can't do this. Dude, you can't do that. At some point, if Trump gets a deal, he's going to say, you guys got to go along with it. What are you going to say? No. To say that he has leverage is an understatement, and Trump will use it. He'll say either you're going to do it and he'll come up with 5 or 10 things that'll end it overnight. And at that point, what? They'll, so bottom line is, let me add this. Another problem that Europe has, a big one, Tulsi Gabbard just got confirmed, right? So in the same way that, I don't know if you know what happened. One of the things that happened also with Keith Kellogg is it comes out about his daughter, and she's a part of this, one of these spook kind of organizations that are running weapons and mercenaries and all this crap. The same USAID trash that they were cleaning up, his daughter is completely entangled in this mess, right? Okay, well, he's out the door. So you got this clown out the door, and now Tulsi Gabbard. And regardless of this, there's going to be things about her I don't like, but I'll say this: she's going to tell Trump the truth about Russia, about Ukraine, about NATO, about what Europe can offer, about the intelligence reports. Trump will be operating on reality. And that is a problem for Europe because they've been living in this neocon fantasy world. And Gabbard is going to be a big problem for them. And I'll say this, one of the fears I have is, oh gosh, out of the frying pan into the fire, we're going to get out of Europe and then we're going to go attack and go to war with China. We're all going to go there. I have more confidence that Tulsi Gabbard's going to tell them the truth about China. So Europe is going to have problems with Gabbard, and the China hawks are going to have problems with Gabbard because she's going to tell them the truth. And as she's talked about, hey, she's from Hawaii. When the nukes start flying, from China, Hawaii gets vaporized first, and that's where her family members is. So anyway, Tulsi Gabbard, how she affects this dynamic.
Well, she's an absolute game changer. When we talk about the deep state, probably the deepest state out there is the CIA, the U.S. intelligence community. But in particular, the CIA. They are populated by, people can say that I have, I think what is hard feelings, I guess. But in 1993, let me put it this way. In 1990, I received the second classified commendation from the director of the CIA for my work in Russia in the Soviet Union as an analyst for the quality of the analysis that I was providing about the Soviet target. Number two. And then I, got out of that job, went to war, became a United Nations weapons inspector. But in 1993, I was invited back by some people in the CIA who said, hey, why don't you get out of this UN thing? It's not healthy for you. You're an American and you're trying to tell the truth, and our government isn't about the truth of Iraqi weapons mass destruction. You don't want to die on that hill. Come back and get back to what you do best, which is the Russian target. So I went in and I did an interview with a very senior person who went on to become a director of the CIA. And we talked. At that time, he was heading up they changed it from a Soviet analysis to the Office of Russian and East European Affairs or something of that nature. Long interview, talked. There's no doubt that I was a Russian expert. And he said, at the end, he came back and he said, we're not going to take you. I said, why? He said, well, you're not what we're looking for. I said, but literally 3 years ago, I was like exactly what you were looking for. I was one of the top Soviet analysts. That's the problem. You're a Soviet analyst. We don't want old school thinkers. We don't want people who actually know anything about Russia. We're trying to reinvent our approach, and we need new thinkers who don't, who aren't trapped by your intellectual, the four corners of your intellectual world. It's a whole new world out there. You're just not what we're looking for. What they were looking for were people that weren't experts on Russia, but experts on exploiting Russia. And the CIA has been in the Russian exploitation business. And they have, since that time, populated their Russian analytical staff with people who believe that Russia should be dismantled and destroyed, not peacefully coexist. And see, I made the mistake of being in that class of people who was there when Ronald Reagan decided that Russia was no longer the evil empire. I was in the Soviet Union in June of 1988 when Reagan went to Moscow and told the university students, when they said, do you still view us as the evil empire? He said, no, those days are gone. I view you as friends. My God, friends. Imagine that. I actually helped implement a treaty that got rid of nuclear weapons, made the world safer, made America and Russia closer. Turns out that's not the direction these new Russian experts wanted to be. They have hijacked it. It got so bad that Gina Haspel, who was the director of the CIA under I think Trump, brought her in.
And before Trump too, I think under
she started before Trump, then she stayed on. But and she's an old school CIA person, not soft at all, implicated in the torture, post 9/11 torture aspect of this thing. She ran a black site and did some bad things to bad people. But she tried to take on Russia House, and they told her pound sand. She said, you guys, you're this little club, and I think you're just making stuff up, which they were. Just to remind you that the CIA in Moscow has had a horrible track record. Every one of their station chiefs has been rolled and kicked out. Every time they try and go and do stuff, they get rolled up, they get kicked out. They don't. Do you remember the guy that got caught with the wig and the money and all that kind of stuff? Yeah. Let's just show you how the CIA operates. The Tsarnaev brothers, you remember the Boston bombing incident?
Yep.
These guys are from Dagestan. And so the Russians were trying to help us and say, hey, this is problematic. You might want to take a look at these guys. We see them communicating, all that stuff. And the FBI dropped the ball, the bomb goes off. So now the FBI wants to make contact with the Russians. So the Russians say, here's our number one guy that does this in the Northern Caucasus. He's our special counterintelligence guy. and they meet in Moscow, and the FBI gets a relationship with this, and intelligence is being passed and shared. And what did the CIA do? We can't trust the Russians. We have to recruit this guy. So they got the name of the guy, and then they went and cold pitched him. And the guy's like, what are you doing? I'm giving you the information that you want. You asked me a question. I'm giving you the answers, but it's done the right way. No. The CIA wants to own you. Here, and so this guy sets up a meeting. He has the money. He has everything, the wig, the whole thing comes in. But what he didn't realize is that guy's a Russian patriot. He told his boss, they said, yeah, set up the meeting. He did, came in, bam. Guess who put the handcuffs on him? The guy he was trying to recruit. That's how stupid the CIA is. That's how they operate. I'm telling you, the day that when I was doing that stuff, I didn't do that stuff. That's not how it worked, man. That's not how it worked. We actually got good intelligence. We succeeded in our operations. But the new CIA, because they don't understand Russia, they're not willing to learn about Russia. All they know is that Putin's bad, Russia's stupid, and everybody wants to work for America. That's their going in philosophy. These are the people that are in the CIA today. The Russia House is a bad, and every one of these mission centers around the world are populated with CIA analysts and operators who think the same way. That's why we're not winning. That's why we're losing everywhere, because it's this old school thinking that doesn't solve any of the problems because they don't define the problems properly. Tulsi Gabbard's going to clean house. She's going to come in, and you're just going to watch. They're all going to be fired. It's going to be a thing of beauty. And everybody's like, well, that'll make a more dangerous world for America. No. Imagine for a second if you actually had real Russian experts telling the president of the United States what's really happening in Russia. In the decisions that can be made based upon that. Imagine if you had a real Chinese expert. It was really trying to improve relations with China based upon mutual respect and reality, as opposed to promulgating the same Cold War era, we must support Taiwan no matter what. And why do they have to support Taiwan? Because they all have a vested economic interest in that. And that's what this is all about. It's not about national security. It's about contracts and money and getting your sinecure. You play the game so that you can get that chair at Georgetown and teach a whole bunch of stupid master's degree kids about your version of the world as opposed to reality. That's how it works. Then you can rotate back into government. The whole system is broken. And the reason why they were going after Tulsi Gabbard so hard is she ain't from the system. And she's going to clean the system. This is the best thing that could ever happen to the United States intelligence community, besides simply shutting down the CIA. I mean, the CIA is a broken institution. They haven't put out quality analysis ever in recent years, and their operators are all a bunch of alcoholic, whoremongering, pathetic waste cases. They need to be fired. You need to recruit new people who are imbued with the spirit of serving their country, not by enriching themselves, but by pure service. And sometimes serving your country as a Russian expert means not viewing the Russians as the enemy, but viewing the Russians as colleagues, as people that we can work with, as collaborators in peace. Imagine if we had people who viewed it that way, the progress we could make. When I was there, I went in as a Cold Warrior. The Russians were my sworn enemy. I wanted to kill them all. By the time I finished, I was collaborating with the Russians to get rid of nuclear weapons, making the world a safer place. That's the direction we need to be heading across the board. And Tulsi Gabbard is going to be doing that. And in doing so, she's going to be able to brief the president of the United States, not on what the deep state wants her to brief, but on what the truth of the world is. And that's a good thing.
Let me show you something about, and just a perfect example. Now, this is my thought about why our boy Kellogg might be out the window. Just show you something real quick. So this is this R.T. Weatherman Foundation, right? Our founders, this is their team, and their team is President Megan Mobbs. That's it for their team. Now, if you go over to Ukraine mission, right, and you look, we've delivered over 10,000 pallets of aid and 70,000 organizations in Ukraine, 20 government organizations, blah, 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 including recent deliveries to Bakhmut, Kherson. You go on there, right? Oh, whoa, look who this guy is. Coordinated and sponsored travel of General Keith Kellogg, right, to Ukraine, which led to testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee about providing rapid lethal Ukraine. So they send this clown over there and he comes back begging for money, partnered with U.S. Institute for Peace. Then when you go back, you start reading. If you go on, you'll also find out that one of the things they did was they, let me find it. The other thing that they did, well, you have to look it up, but the other thing that they did was they, interestingly enough, they said American volunteers who were injured or killed in Ukraine, mercenaries, they helped to send them to Germany for treatment and to repatriate their remains. So that's Megan Mobbs, right? But let's look what else Megan Mobbs is doing. So she's one of these, you know, deep state kind of things. Now we got her again. Independent Women's Forum. Well, wait a minute. A minute ago, she was the president of the RT Weatherman Foundation. Now she's the director also at the same time, the director for the Center for American Safety and Security, the Independent Women's Forum. That's that deep state crap.
100%.
These people, she's the president of this group over here that's running guns and mercs in Ukraine. And then she's the director of the Center for American Safety and Security. Keith Kellogg was the very swamp. I believe that's maybe have contributed to him getting out the door, because his daughter is the USAID, U.S. Institute for Peace, crooked money, mercenary, gun-running swamp creature. And he's eaten from the same trough. Anyway, your thoughts on that, Scott?
No, this is what's being dismantled right now. And as I said, as the truth is exposed, I love it when people, you know, Scott's, you know, embrace the MAGA, drink the MAGA Kool-Aid. No, idiots. I'm just against corruption. If you think this is wrong, prove it. But you can't, because the data is right there in front of you. It's so bad now that you got even Chuck Schumer going, well, of course there's waste. And Chuck, you're the
waste.
swamp.
That's theft.
Yeah, you're the swamp creature. And well, that's the whole thing. It is theft. It's money. They know that the money that they're allocating, and the other big secret of Washington, D.C. is once the money starts getting allocated, it never gets turned off.
Right.
And so there is literally hundreds of billions of dollars a year going to entities that no longer exist but still accept the money. They shut that down, but in comes the $10 million and nobody's asking questions. They'll hire 80,000 IRS agents to come knocking on my door because, you know, maybe I failed to declare a $150 donation that was made here. I'm just making stuff up right now, but they're gonna, oh my God, you didn't pay taxes on $150. We got 3 gun carrying IRS agents coming after you. But the guy that just sits there said, I shut that stuff down 10 years ago, but they're paying me $10 million a year to do nothing. Nobody's trying to shut it down. They're okay with that. They're okay with that because that's the way the system works. I mean, we're paying Social Security to 150-year-old people. And it just, they don't know how to shut it off because it wasn't meant to be shut off. It was meant to be turned on and make people wealthy for doing nothing more than sustaining. When we talk about the deep state, it's an unelected blob of people who exist just to exist. And it becomes a self-licking, self-perpetuating ice cream cone. And it doesn't accomplish anything. And it has led to the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine, I'm in the middle of writing something about this, but the war in Ukraine didn't happen by design so much as it happened because it was inevitable. Because when you start a system rolling, it was the inevitable outcome, which is why when you track it out, I say, well, then the next inevitable outcome from that is nuclear war with Russia, which is why we have to stop this thing. All you people out there saying, my God, this, that, and the other thing, you do understand that if Kamala Harris had been elected, we would all be dead by the summer of 2025 because it was inevitable. You couldn't stop it. It was a system that was moving toward the logical outcome, which is thermonuclear war, that the Biden administration, by the way, reminded us they were ready to fight. You do remember the Strategic Command Director of Plans saying, yeah, we're ready to do that right now. I remember talking to a senior member of U.S. Congress who received the CIA threat briefing. They said the scary thing wasn't that the CIA was saying that the Russians are bluffing. The scary thing is that the CIA was telling us that the Russians aren't bluffing, and the Biden administration said, that's okay, we're ready for a nuclear war. Guys, that's how close we came. And so, and what made that happen isn't designed. It's not like the Biden administration woke up and said, okay, let's go to nuclear war with Russia. The system, the corruption that produces the people like this lady whose job is simply to create conflict, create chaos, create this. The system was leading us down this path. And to get off of it, we have to have somebody who isn't of the system. Is Donald Trump perfect? No. Anybody who's been watching me knows that I'm very critical of Donald Trump on many, many issues. But on getting us off of this train wreck that was leading to nuclear war, I'm Team MAGA all the way, baby. You can color me any what color you want to. You can call me any name you want to. If it's about preventing a preventable nuclear war with Russia, I'm in. I'm all in. And I'm not going to be ashamed of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the bottom line. What outcome are we seeking? And now we're on a different path, at least a path that even economically, I don't think things look all good for the U.S. But guess what? At least we'll be alive. And here's what I'll say about the U.S. too. And this is a reality that a lot of geopolitical people will there's a certain reality. Countries need to be able to produce their own energy. They need to be able to produce their own food, and they need to be able to defend themselves, defend their borders. If you can do those three things, you can survive. Russia can do those things. It can survive. The United States can do those things. And whatever happens, the U.S. can survive because we can grow food and our economy go to crap, all of that, but we can do those three things. Europe can't do those things. Don't have any energy, don't grow food real well. You know what I mean? The places that are doing all the talking that don't do that. China that can't actually do all of those things, but they got the longest border in the world, one of the longest borders in the world with Russia, a country that can, and they are now connected at the hip. So I think one of the important things that came out of this is that inextricable link alliance between Russia and China, wherein in the past they had problems. It's good for the world. It's good for the Eurasia. And that is an unbreakable Eurasian link because both of those countries, I think, were driven to understand, you know what? We got to, Russia, look, we got all of this stuff to sell, but we got to have somebody to sell it to. And if they're too far away, that could be a problem. And the Europeans are unreliable. The Chinese need the stuff. They'll keep us going. And the Chinese were like, hey, Russia's got a lot of stuff we need. And both of them realized we need each other to survive. I think that was an important outcome of this thing. These two countries were brought together to realize it's not just an alliance of we love each other, we like each other, we're brotherly countries. It's turning into that. But it was, you know what? In order for us, both of us to be world powers, we have to be a Eurasian power and the things that they can accomplish as a unit. Anyway, your thoughts on that, Scott?
Well, it's exactly. I mean, it's hilarious. Not hilarious. I interviewed, you know who Maria Zakharova is, the spokesperson of the Foreign Ministry of Russia. Her father was a Russian diplomat in China. You know, she speaks fluent Chinese. If you ever seen her in Beijing, she speaks fluent Chinese. She grew up in China. Her father is an experienced diplomat, and I got to interview him. And you know, one of the things he came out about, you know, because, you know, there's this talk about Putin and Xi and the friendship and all this kind of stuff. I said, you know, what is the relationship between Russia and China? And he said, we're neighbors. We have no choice but to get along or our lives will be hell. And we're not going to let outsiders come in and ruin our neighborhood. We get to decide how we do things, and you know, and the West has made it easier by allowing us to have common cause because you've come at us both using the same tactics. You know, it's fascinating. I think one of the things that's driving Trump is that if he can become a friend with Putin, you know, friendly relations with Putin, that Trump believes that he can separate Russia from China. Because the goal right now is to go all in on China. And again, if I were advising him, and Tulsi Gabbard hopefully will advise him, and just say, I just want to remind you, Mr. President, that they're neighbors, and it's going to be impossible to drive a wedge between them. This isn't the Cold War. This isn't Kissinger going in and all that kind of stuff. They're neighbors, and they're going to get along, and we have to deal with that reality. That maybe we should also
add one quick thing.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be viable to think that you can be friends with one and enemies with the other. That ain't going to work either.
That was just my follow-up is,
okay, good.
Our strategy is that we should be friends with China too. And amazing what would happen if you become friends with Russia and China. Stability in Europe and the Pacific. Africa becomes a more manageable issue instead of becoming a new Cold War like playground for the great powers to divvy up between them, because the only thing the United States knows right now is war. Trump's trying to break us free of that. I don't know if people are noticing how he is de-emphasizing the military solution in Ukraine. I mean, he sent his Secretary of Defense in to basically say, we're not going to war for Europe. Straight up, across the board. What aspect of anything he said told the Europeans, a repeat of the Biden, I do bad Biden imitation, but, it is a sacred obligation, there was nothing sacred about Article 5. First of all, read it. There's no obligation there. Article 5 doesn't require you to do anything except consult. Doesn't mean go to war. There's no automatic, dispatch of troops, but it's a sacred obligation. Well, it's so sacred that, the new Secretary of Defense went, if you guys want to send peacekeepers to Ukraine, there won't be an Article 5 attachment to it because we ain't going to war for you. We're not going to war. We're de-emphasizing the military. And I hope that this whole concept of peace through strength in the Pacific is a show that we're serious about, defending ourselves. But the reality is we need to figure out how to peacefully cooperate with China. We have to deal with realities. The reality is in the Pacific right now, what has happened? BRICS. China is a big player in BRICS, and the way BRICS plays down is, yes, everybody is a member of it. But for instance, if you're going to talk about the African continent, one would say that South Africa is probably the BRICS leader that deals that. If you want to talk about South America, you might want to talk about Brazil, Europe, Russia, South Asia, India. Pacific, you get some India and China, but a lot of China. So in the Pacific right now, if I'm an American, what just happened recently? Indonesia joined BRICS as a full member. That's huge, guys. Just start counting bodies. I think there's three nations in the world that have more than 1 billion people in them, and Indonesia is one of them. And the other one's China, and the other one's India. And now Indonesia is part of the BRICS. Malaysia, Thailand are all joining BRICS. That's sort of some of the big players. And if you're other nations in the ASEAN Economic Forum, you're sitting there going, what do we want to do here, guys? Trump pulled out of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There was no American-led replacement. BRICS seems to be the big dog in town. We can't use the G20 to rely on anymore because Indonesia, which was a G20, stalwart, is now BRICS. You can't serve two masters. I mean, the bottom line is the Pacific's heading that direction. So what do? Go to war in the Pacific to win back those economic, markets? No, we have to learn to compete better. I don't know if too many people picked up on this. There's a big controversy right now between New Zealand and the Cook Islands. Yeah, because the Cook Islands just they sent their prime minister to China, and they're going to sign an agreement with China on tourism and infrastructure development, et cetera. But one of the interesting aspects of it is deep sea mining. I don't know if you remember back in the 1970s, there were these articles written about the nodules that exist at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, the polymetallic nodules. And basically, as the Earth did its thing, cobalt, nickel, and magnesium sort of coagulated together in these little stone-sized nodules that apparently line the entire bottom of the ocean. This is like really precious metal. and it's just down there in almost pure form. But it's hard to get to. We're talking a lot of way down there. So the Cook Islands is going to sign an agreement with China to go in and do deep sea mining. Now, what has New Zealand, Australia, and the West done? Well, I'm not saying that climate change isn't something important. I'm not here as a climate change denialist, but I am here to say that from the Cook Islands perspective, if you're going to have New Zealand say you can't do deep sea mining because we don't know what the consequences will be to the environment of the ocean, you're denying them. The Chinese are going to come in, they're going to do the mining. Why aren't we? Why aren't we doing the mining? Why didn't we pick up on the fact that we're the ones that called this out in the 70s? We could have been the world's leader in deep sea mining had we wanted to be, and therefore we would now have cobalt. We wouldn't need African supplies of cobalt. That would liberate us from sustaining this ongoing conflict in the Congo, where 1 million people die, but nobody talks about them because they're just black people. We don't care about black people in Africa. They could die by the millions, and they are dying by the millions, and we don't care. How many Americans know that Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda are all involved in this M23 uprising against the Congolese and what that's all about? Most people go, I have no clue what you're talking about. Bingo. Do you know that South Africa is involved in this conflict? The South African Defense Forces are involved in this conflict. You know that Kenya used to be, and Kenya might come back in, and you could be looking at World War III in the Congo for what? Cobalt. Why do we need cobalt? Cell phones. Okay, literally, guys, and yet all the cobalt we need is at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean if we would just mine it. But we're not doing that. This is the direction Trump needs to go. You need to be innovative here. If you go in and you become the masters of deep sea mining, you suddenly liberate yourself from the Chinese stranglehold on these precious. But the Chinese control the cobalt markets in the world. If you go take a look at the mines that are in the Congo, the Chinese own half those mines. That cobalt goes to China. This is why China is in Afghanistan to get the precious earth metals or rare earth metals there. That's why people are like, why is Trump going into Greenland? I don't understand why Trump is going into Greenland. Well, because maybe Trump read the reports that say that Greenland is home to some, a huge, cache of rare earth metals. I mean, guys, you got to start thinking out of the box here about how we're going to interact with China. We're not going to go to war with China. That just isn't going to happen. We're not going to get into a military. China's producing, we produce 12 ships a year. China's producing 260 ships a year. Game, set, match, guys. If you want to get into a shipbuilding contest with China, they already won it. And if they turn their attention to other things like building airplanes, they'll build more than we do. They have newer. You saw the new Generation 6 fighter they're floating around. We don't want to get into an arms race with China. They're building
any kind of race with China, you're going to lose. I saw where they had one factory. It could build in like 10 days. This factory can build as many missiles as we have in one factory in our entire arsenal. We can't, that's silly. But, I will say this, J.D. Vance a while back said, look, we can't go, they're 7,000 miles away and we can't go to war with. So I think, and Tulsi's there, I feel at least now is that
we're heading in the right direction.
Drive to war, at least they made, again, I'm not saying these people are perfect or they're wonderful or they're going to do, you know what I mean? They're great. All right. No, I'm just saying, you got to stop that mad drive to a war that's certain to go nuclear.
Yeah,
and
that's the direction I think we're headed.
At least
we have no choice. Yeah, we have no choice but to head in that direction.
Exactly. One last thing before we go, Scott. However much time, if you got 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, Trump with the okay, we'll just get the Palestinians out and we will, take over blah blah, but build a Riviera there. And my immediate response when everybody flipped out, I'm like, the MBS, the head of Saudi Arabia, said way back. People forget, all these Democrats. Can you believe it? I'm like, that's exactly what Tony Blinken said, like days after this whole thing started, right? So this is not new. I said, but very early, not long after that, MBS basically said, look, if we try anything like that, I'll be killed. I'll be dead, right? These rulers, these leaders, albeit, you've got issues with these monarchs in the region, all know there are certain things that they can and can't do because it will so destabilize their countries. Their lives would be in danger. Maybe some of their military leaders would turn on them and kill them. And so for all that people are talking about, Trump's going to do this, my opinion is there's no way that can happen because the Arab streets would erupt and it would destabilize. And my understanding is the Organization of Islamic Countries are coming together. They're going to do a statement that basically says, hell no, I don't see any possibility of that happening. It's, again, boneheaded. Trump's boxing himself in. Your thoughts on the Gaza situation, Scott? However much time you want.
I'm going to get in trouble again, but I'm 100% correct on this, and I called it the moment it happened. It's not a plan. For all you people out, Trump surrounded himself with Zionists. Look at this horrible plan he put out there. It's not a plan, guys. It's not a plan. It cannot be implemented. It's impossible to implement that plan. You need 100,000 American troops. Where do they come from? Right. I just told you that, we're trying to pull out of Europe. We're talking about refocusing there. Hegsmith just said it's going to be Fortress America and Europe. Where in that does it factor? Not because it's not 100,000 troops. That's on the ground. You need 60,000 overhead to do the logistics. Plus, you have to have another 100,000 ready to rotate in. That's 260,000 plus another 100,000 earmarked to rotate in. 360,000 troops. Count how many people we have in the U.S. military today, and you'll realize we can't do Gaza. We're not going to do Gaza. It was never meant to happen. What Trump did is say, I am not going to allow the same system that sustained this conflict for the last 50 years to continue. I'm not going to play that game. He surrounded himself with a whole bunch of pro-Zionist people. Israel this, Israel that. What did Trump say? Israel ain't a part of Gaza. I took it over. I own it. I'm not even going to buy it. I'm just going to take it. It's mine. I got it. I own it. Where does Israel factor in that? Remember Netanyahu white-knuckling it at the podium? Was he's listening? Going, what the hell's going on here? So Trump took Israel out of the picture and said, I own this. I'm going to move up 1.9 million people. In Egypt, you're taking them. In Jordan, you're taking them. And the Egyptians and Jordanians went, what? Did you see the king of Jordan at the press conference with Trump? The man was having a heart attack. Literally, as Trump was talking, he's blinking his eyes and twitching and all that. Because he said, I'm not even going to, I'm not going to land in Amman, Jordan if I agree to this. They're going to kill me when I get off the airplane. Sisi's listening going, holy God, no. And he canceled the conversation with Trump, called the Saudis. You know why Trump did all this? And I said it day one. It's not a plan. It's a proposal. It's a New York City real estate proposal. Trump wants to buy a piece of property, or he wants to sell a piece of property. And people want it, but he says, $100 billion. People are like, we're never going to pay $100 billion. But then Trump starts not talking and starts talking about the other thing. And people realize they're not going to be part of the deal that they want to be a part of. Or he's going to put him out of business. What he wants is a counter proposal. Garland, he got the counter proposal. Did you see what Sisi just did? Called him up and said, and I just want to point out that the Egyptians have never talked about investing in Gaza, reconstruction of Gaza. The Egyptians have been the most hypocritical people out there about the Palestinians, Palestinian statehood, etc. The Jordanians the same way. They don't want a Palestine. They hate the Palestine. The Saudis despise the Palestine. And yet, because Trump came in and put the most audacious thing out there that was going to cause all three of those regimes to go down, there's a counter proposal out there right now, Garland. And that's what this was all about, the counter proposal. And now the Egyptians are saying, no. We're going to go in there. We have a plan now. We're going to go in there and we're going to reconstruct. We don't have to move the Palestine. And the beautiful thing is, Trump ain't paying for it. It's going to happen. But Trump's in control now. He controls the agenda. He controls everything, but other people are going to pay for it. And that's why he broke the paradigm of failure. There's no guarantee that what Trump's going to do is going to succeed. But for all those people out there screaming that Trump is so pro-Zionist, why did he repost Jeffrey Sachs' condemnation of Netanyahu? If you can't answer that question, if you don't know why, then don't tell me about the pro-Zionist. Why did he box Israel out of the Gaza solution if he's so pro-Zionist? You know who, Ben Gvir and all these other people who were, Gaza is ours. Gaza's going to be a great Jewish homeland. No, Gaza belongs to America. Trump said, I'm not buying it. I own it already. It's mine. No. And he does own it.
How disgusting that is. I'm going to let it go. We said disgusting that Gaza belongs to America. What the fuck kind of colonizing bullshit and racist nonsense are you spewing, boy? See Trump, he showed him he's tough. Hey, I own it. What? You can't be owning nobody property, man. And it's not that easy because you got to send your troops over there and get what the fuck the Israelis got. But at the same time, puppet behavior for the small hats. But Scott's still trying to look at Garland. Garland just sitting there like this bullshit, Scott. I heard you run this bullshit on somebody else. Same nonsense he trying to push this. It's going to blow up in his goddamn face. Trump ain't trying to make nobody else bring a better goddamn deal to the table. What he did was try to continue the colonization of Gaza and say anybody but the Palestinians own fucking Gaza. And the small hats, they love that talk. All right, as long as they don't own it, right? Oh, we can negotiate everything else later. As long as what Trump is saying, they're going to go. They want somewhere else better. That's disgusting, bro.
Because the people are now responding to his ridiculous proposal. It's not going to be about genocide. No American troops are going to move anybody out. We now have the Egyptians coming in saying, we're going to do this, and Saudi's going to...
Ethnic cleansing, racist, genocidal proposal. Not just ridiculous. See, no, it's ethnic cleansing. You can't move 2 million people off their property and talk about building condos and all that type of shit, and then act like it's just some New York real estate deal. Yeah, the genocidal New York wiping out the natives real estate deal. Don't forget that part. There's nothing cute about what Trump said. That was ridiculous and nothing dignified about talking like that. It's people like Scott willing to sell their soul to continue. No. Trump is wrong for talking like that. He don't get no pass speaking like no fucking colonizer.
Fund it. And that's the first one. Trump's going to come back with a counter. They're going to come back with more. And in the end, there's going to be a brand new plan for reconstructing Gaza that's going to be realistic. And watch. Trump says Hamas can't be part of this. Well, the Russians already began negotiations with 14 different Palestinian factions to come up with a political singularity. Then they handed off to the Chinese, who last summer held a meeting in Beijing where they even solidified it further. We know that.
Imagine saying Hamas can't speak for the Palestinians. They're the strongest faction now. Nobody's going to be speaking for especially not them puppets in the West Bank. Mahmoud Abbas and them, the Israeli fucking puppets. Nobody's stronger out of the Palestinians than Hamas. Don't ever think you're going to put together no puppets to speak. Man, please, Hamas, but we'll deal with them clowns in real life. No, you're going to have to deal with the winners. Hamas, they survived this war. That's that
Hamas, that Gaza isn't going to be ruled by Hamas when this ends. It's going to be ruled by something not called Hamas, but Hamas is going to be a part of it, maybe a bigger part of it.
Now,
but that's the game.
How humiliating is that? If the same people running it, you think you saving face by saying, "Could y'all just change y'all name?" So you want to feel better inside? If the same revolutionaries running it, this is what American in my Scott didn't get over yourself. The revolutionaries who fought, they're gonna still run that territory. I don't give a damn what type of name you come up with to name the new group who gonna be leading over the Palestinians. It's gonna be them people who kicked ass on behalf of the people who running it.
Game that's being played here. So for all you literalists out there, genocide was done by Joe Biden. That was the genocide. Tony Blinken, people that could have stopped this conflict and didn't. Trump inherited this mess and he's trying to fix it. And he's doing it in the Trump way. And you can sit there and criticize all I want, but I'm going to tell you right now, he got the counter proposal. That's a hell of a lot better than anything anybody else has ever done on this issue.
And there's one or two ways to look at it. And as a guy who studies then, I always put it like this: the outcomes doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how he got there, right? So there's two ways to look at it. And one way is Trump said, "I'm going to do this, and this is going to force him to do that," and he gets the counter proposal, right? The other way, which I tend to lean to, I've always saw Trump more as the Inspector Gadget kind of guy. The old Inspector Gadget, where there was a mystery or there was a problem and he stumbled and bumbled and tripped and accidentally, and in the end he always solved the mystery. You know what I mean? And in the end, the mystery was solved, right? So I more like see Trump and says he kind of stumbles along. Okay, let's do this, and then that fumbles and bumbles, and then he gets a counter proposal. In the end, it is irrelevant whether Trump used a brilliant strategy to get a counter proposal or whether he did something and he had no idea what he was doing and he got the counter proposal. In the end, you know what matters? He got the counter proposal. I don't care how he got there. That's a discussion for us to have on YouTube.
It do matter if Trump going on national TV and saying 2 million people, they got to get off their land. I own it. It's mine now. Yeah, that matter to me. I didn't vote for you to be talking like that. No, it mattered to me. Me. See, these dudes here, they try to just gloss over that. Well, he only had to talk like that. Oh, man, that's colonialist talk. You can't just threaten, to kick people off their land and try to humiliate them, make them feel like they nothing, and talk about you seizing their territory, belong to you now, gangsterism. That's disgusting, bro. No. They fought not to be treated like that. They have some dignity. They fought for it. They didn't march for it. Like they said, they get tricked out of they shit like us. Start marching and giving away every goddamn thing. Oh no, they're still fighting for their goddamn land. You see, Trump don't get to say, no, now I'm taking your fucking land. No, that you got to go over there and continue to try to get it from them, how everybody else been trying to get it. At the barrel of a gun. Trump can't sit on TV and just say it's mine now. Boy, blood is being spilled over that land. Talking is not going to get it done. That's disgusting.
As to whether he's a genius, he's a savant, he's an idiot, we will never really know the answer to that. In the end, here's what matters. From the very beginning, one of the things that I said was, when it comes down to it, Saudi money is going to come in, and the Saudis are going to rebuild, and the Saudis they're going to come up with a plan, and the Saudis are going to come in because it benefits them. Not because it benefits the leader of Saudi Arabia, who wants a stable country and a stable region, to say, we got to stabilize this thing. And ultimately, sooner or later, even though a lot of people may not like it, maybe even including me, you're going to get this normalization thing done. And Saudis have already laid it out. In order for us to stabilize, we got to have this. And all of these tracks are going to get towards this normalization and the things that the Saudis have said in the beginning that they need. And they got an unlimited well of money. And what do they care? If you say to the Saudis, well, it's going to cost 100, 200, 300 billion, the Saudis will be like, oh, I think I got that land between my couch cushions that fell out of my pockets and change. Here's 300 billion. What do they care? So I think ultimately we get to where the Saudis eventually say, it's in the end, it's going to get the normalization. And the Saudis, I think they knew it long ago. You know what I mean? And the other thing I always tell people is, look, it's not an accident that the CEO of Aramco, the most profitable corporation in the world, just happens to be on the board of directors of BlackRock, which is manages $9 trillion. These people got a plan, and you may not know it, but in the end, the last thing, I think at the end gets to the normalization thing. And anyway, do you think that's an ultimate goal?
Of course it is. I mean, Trump's the one who put forward the Abraham Accords. And the Abraham Accords were all about normalization. They almost succeeded. I mean, and I want to also point out the Abraham Accords about the end of the Palestinian state. There was never going to be a Palestinian state under the Abraham Accords. That's why Hamas did what they did. On October 6th, it looked like Israel and Saudi Arabia were going to normalize relations, and that's game, set, match. October 7th changed everything. And today there's a new reality there. But Trump wants to get back to where he was with the Abraham Accords, normalization, because that's, again, Trump's game plan is about economic stability. And what the Abraham Accord did is bring the Gulf Arab states together with Israel to create this economic union that would be beneficial to all. That's the dream. Well, it's more complicated now because it was all supposed to create a Sunni shield against the Shia crescent, but now Saudi Arabia and Iran are buddies because China brokered a deal. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. But that's where Trump wants to get back: de-emphasize the military, overemphasize the economic, and you can't do that as long as there's a conflict between the Palestinians and Israel. So Trump, I believe, is sincere.
Don't you think there's going to be a Palestinian state?
I think, well, first of all, there can't be a Palestinian state without Gaza. And so the fact
is that what the Saudis said? Didn't they say there has to be that in order to get normalization?
We're going to have normalization as to Palestinians, and they also said, and its capital must be in East Jerusalem. But look, it takes one step at a time. Trump put by saying he's taking over Gaza, depopulating Gaza, turning it into something where there will be no Palestinians, what basically was killing a Palestinian state. Today, now with the counter proposal, there's a chance that Gaza will be Palestinian, and if it's reconstructed, and the emphasis on resistance and the more emphasis on coexistence could become the foundation. If you remember, everybody, when they envisioned a Palestinian state, it was West Bank and Gaza. West Bank and Gaza. I think you're seeing the paradigm shift to Gaza and the West Bank. Where this new entity, this Hamas-driven entity, whatever it's going to be called, has a greater say in the overall Palestinian issues than Abu Mazen, the Israeli sycophant who currently runs the Palestinian Authority. So I think we're seeing the paradigm shift across the board. Is it going to succeed? I don't know. I like your Inspector Gadget thing. I think Trump is going to bumble, roll up. Next, all the problems are solved because he had the right gadget at the right time. But all I know is that there's a counter proposal out right now that has the potential of turning Gaza into the centerpiece of whatever a future Palestinian state may look like. And that, people are like, how could that? I just remind people, do you remember Grozny, the capital of Chechnya, and what it looked like in 2002? I was just there last year. Completely rebuilt. I mean, we're talking so many lights, and it looks like Las Vegas. That could be Gaza, but it wasn't going to be Gaza if you kept doing what they had done in the past. If you kept this relationship, what else isn't part of Gaza today? Kogat. Kogat is the Israeli occupation force mechanism to control every aspect of Palestinian life in Gaza. That's gone. And if the Egyptians come in and rebuild, there's no more Israeli. Guys, this is game-changing stuff, potential. Again, proof is in the pudding, but for all the critics out there, stop your knee-jerk hatred and start saying, if you care about Palestine, maybe you need to start caring about a plan that gets genuine reconstruction that isn't a prisoner of past prejudice, past paradigms. There's no guarantee it's going to work, but it's the only option out there right now. And again, you can hate Trump's proposal. I did.
Not true.
There's now a counter proposal out there that didn't exist and wasn't going to exist without Trump's proposal. You were never going to get the Egyptians to commit to what they did with Saudi money if Trump didn't put what he did on the table. You can't get to Z from A without the A.
Yeah, and last but not least, I'll say this: there was a come to Jesus moment, albeit applying that to the Zionism. Okay, and for Israel, and I think, and this was it. This was it. After all of the bombing, slaughtering, genocide, and everything, and I was watching, I saw some of this stuff online, and when there was a prisoner exchange and it was all over, and there were thousands of Hamas fighters, smart, shiny new uniforms, weapons, driving new cars. I think they probably took them from the Israelis anyway, and they're and the Israelis are looking like, I thought you told me we defeated those guys and we killed 80%, and they were all out there, and they're going back to work, and they're putting people in charge in the rubble, albeit, but they're coming back in, and the Israelis looked and they realized they lost. They realized that they bombed and they slaughtered and they look like crap worldwide. The world hates them, everything. And Hamas came back out.
Talking about we own it.
And they're like, man, if you want some more, we'll fight some more. We prefer not. And they were out, and the people were in the streets cheering Hamas. And you looked at it, and it's just like everything that they tried to do, not just failed, backfired in the biggest way. The message was to them: you can't destroy Hamas. You can't destroy the Palestinians. You can't run them out. You lost. They took a terrible, terrible toll of civilians and stuff. You took a terrible toll worldwide as a result of what you did to those civilians, but they came back out cheering, ready, still prepared to fight if you need to. And I'm like, yeah, that's a wake-up call for Israel, whether it is or not. It's a wake-up call for the Israel supporters around the world who are cheering about how they're going to defeat.
Wake-up call for anybody talking about they're going to take the Gaza Strip. You own it now. Bullshit. Like hell you do.
Hamas. They got
And
their
you saw when Israel threatened to end the ceasefire?
You know what happened?
All the Hamas people disappeared back underground. Saying,
and the Houthis said, hey, we're okay. We got to close the Red Sea again and fire missiles at you.
Yeah, I don't think Trump is going to let the ceasefire terminate on Saturday. I think there's phone calls being made. I think there's pressure being placed. And I think that this the issue will be resolved. First of all, you have the Israeli press now admitting that it was Israel who violated the ceasefire, not Hamas who violated the ceasefire. So legally, I think, again, it could be Inspector Gadget. It could be part of a master plan. But the fact is, I don't think there's going to be a resumption of large-scale violence. The Israelis are murderous sacks, and you know what? Anyways, they've been blowing things up here, there, and everywhere. But that's not the strategic direction that Trump wants to go with the Middle East. He has a broader plan. And for all the people out there going, Trump's going to help Israel bomb Iran. No, he's not. He's actually going to engage in dialogue with Iran to resolve the nuclear issue, to get into a place where, you know, sanctions can be lifted, et cetera. Trump's not looking for a war. And that's refreshing. It's refreshing that he's not looking for a war.
And I'm looking at, just before we go, I'll look at Israeli media, and you're seeing some things there, right? And look at this. Oops. Hamas commits to continue ceasefire, includes release of 3 Israeli hostages. So you're seeing some things there that show, look, there's a significant part of Israel that really, and if the Israelis, you had missiles coming in, you had drones blowing up, you're living in Tel Aviv, life ain't so great. You know, they can't bring anything on the Red Sea. What's little on the shelves is over expensive. So to the average everyday real, do you really want to go back to that?
The answer is no, they don't. And they can't. They can't afford it. People tend to forget that Israel is a bankrupt nation whose economy has suffered, almost fatal damage because of 15 months of conflict. Nobody's investing in Israel right now, and they're not going to invest because of the insanity of the Netanyahu government. And so, and remember, I can bring up Jeffrey Sachs's condemnation of Netanyahu. Trump posted there. Netanyahu's not long for this world. He is there will be a political solution to the Netanyahu problem. And then Israel will have to find a new generation of leaders that won't be held hostage by this, ridiculous far-right Ben Gvir wing. And reason will have to prevail. It's an uphill struggle. There's no guarantee of an outcome. Zionism is a disease of the mind that is, almost impossible to overcome peacefully. But I think Trump is saying we're not going to war. And for all the people, again, that say, Trump is the most pro-Zionist guy in the world, what's that old Godfather thing? Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. And I think what we're seeing, based upon what Trump has done so far, is that he's keeping the Zionism he recognizes as the enemy, but he has to keep them close so that he can control them.
Remind people about your Russia House project before we go, Scott, in case anybody didn't hear it.
On the road to Moscow and Beijing. I mean, that's kind of been a strategy of many of the foreign policy blob or a lot of the neoconservatives types. They say, well, if soft power and hard power, military power, can be exercised along Russia's border, in Latin America, in Africa, in Eurasia, and we can regime change all smaller countries, weaker countries, then we can isolate and eventually destroy both Russia and China. Whatever Donald Trump does with the organization, the fact that it caused a firestorm means that people are very suspicious of these kind of organizations and have known for quite a long time that they don't operate in the way that they say they do. Where does this leave the U.S. empire now, given that not only is our soft power institutions being questioned, but I have this question to you about how is this strategy actually working out for the U.S. empire?
Not at all. You answered your own question with some of the verbs and adjectives you used. The empire wants to destroy. The empire wants to get rid of. The empire wants to change majorly, if not totally. And that's what aid is aimed at. And we do it in the name of democracy and even occasionally still Christianity and the values of Christianity and liberal democracy at that, and the world rules-based order and all those things. Those are farcical now. And the world finally is waking, at least 6 billion people in the world are finally awakening to the fact that they're farcical. They are disguised for post-colonial colonialism. They are disguised for hegemony. They are disguised for you do it my way or go to the highway and we'll rip the highway up on you. They're a disguise for we will drop bombs on you if you don't correspond with our wishes. They're a disguise for we've been allied with the 5 to 6% of people in Latin America, for example, who are oligarchs and oriented towards the same thing we are, profit and not their people. And we will be associated with you and you alone, and we will overthrow any government that tries to give the people power. In Venezuela, in Colombia, in Ecuador, in Bolivia, in Argentina, in Chile, anywhere in Latin America that this happens, we will destroy you. That's the empire, and that's what's going to kill us.
Donald Trump has entered office. He entered office with all kinds of promises, and I'm glad you brought up that peak power theory, because Donald Trump has come out with a bluster. He's the tariffs, the USAID, threatening Europe now, talking about ending the conflict in Ukraine. But we're already seeing a lot of these moves be set back. Mexico, Canada, no more tariffs on them after very brief conversations. And it was actually unclear in a lot of ways what exactly Donald Trump was actually trying to get here.
Danny, I think that's the reason Steve Walt wrote his article.
Right.
We are now post-Trump peak power, a week or two.
But that leads to the question then, Colonel Wilkerson, in the world of U.S. politics, people vote for their politicians, their presidents, but we know that there's an unelected power of elites who run policy and ultimately dictate what politicians do. But what can a Donald Trump do in this moment? He was supposed to come in and change things. He was supposed to end the conflict in Ukraine, become more of an isolationist. But yet, it seems like the world situation is just a lot different from when he was first president. So what do you make of this peak that Donald Trump may have already reached? And do you feel like this could be underestimating the U.S. empire, or is it truly that it's reached its limits in a lot of ways?
The latter, I think, is part of the case. But let me just give you a hypothetical here that Trump could have done. And I think he would have shocked the world as well as done something extremely positive in a diplomatic and geopolitical, geostrategic sense. He said all these things about he would end the Ukraine war in 24 hours or a day or two or whatever. We all knew that was preposterous. But was it? If he had come in and instead of contemplating his first visit to Mohammed bin Salman or his first state visit to this country being the notorious genocidal maniac Bibi Netanyahu, if he'd have come in and said, get me a plane ticket, shut up, get me a plane ticket, Air Force One, let's go. I want to go to Moscow. Get Vladimir on the phone, tell him I'm coming. Sit down in Moscow with Putin. As you went over Kyiv, spit at Zelensky. Then get to Moscow, sit down with Putin, and in a couple of hours, you could come up with Putin himself, you and Putin, you could come up with the rough design that was leaked in that Newsweek article and took into account most of the real parameters of a negotiated settlement and a peace. Then you go back over Kyiv and you spit at Zelensky again, and you hope someone's hanged him by that time. You get back to Washington and you tell the administration you now head as the major guy, that's what you say. That's what you say. You are the boss. You tell everybody, gear yourself to this. The war in Ukraine is over. I want all the money to stop. I want all the arms to stop. I don't want one scintilla of either to get to Kyiv again. Tell Lockheed Martin to kiss my ass in a windstorm. And we're ending this war. Oh, by the way, I'm going back in a week. We're going to meet again and we're going to settle the deal. Me and Vladimir, and it's going to be over. And Vladimir's not going to do anything to the rest of NATO, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, or anybody else. and we're not going to do anything to him. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to sign an executive order that Ukraine's neutrality is 1,000 years into the future. I know that sounds idiotic, but I'm going to do that anyway, just to show you how I feel about it. And the war's over. And it's over within a month, if not less. That's the kind of drama he tried to create in his first term with his opening to Kim Jong-un and to North Korea. And look at what he did, because he didn't have the staying power. He didn't have the disciples around him who had the staying power and the talent and the brains. He ruined our ally in South Korea, who he made think that finally a peace agreement after 3/4 of a century was coming to the peninsula, and that they were going to be able to think about reunification, which is what, if you look at polls, about 75% of South Korea has wanted for a long time. Under 80 to 90% of South Korea has wanted. He fouled them. Part of the problems happening in Korea right now, in Seoul, with the government and everything, all come out of this failed attempt by Donald Trump. Let's do something successful, President. Let's don't do this stupid stuff where you step out into it just to get drama and to get press. Let's follow through and let's actually complete the action. And where could he do that so solidly and so dramatically and so effectively and so positively other than Ukraine? I mean, it's there. The map is in front of him to do that. Gaza's a little bit different. It's a very much different, more sticky problem, as Netanyahu is going to show here over the next 24 hours or so. But he could do that with Ukraine and gain so much capital initially, right off the bat, gain capital, and put to rest some of these people out there who are screaming and hollering about he's taking over the republic. He's going to destroy us. Elon Musk is an idiot going around with the keys from GAO to every building in the government. I know how hard it is to get those keys. We couldn't get them when the hanging Chads were still hanging.
Revolutionary salute to our brother Randy Thomas for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Appreciate the love, family. Salute.
In Florida, and we couldn't even get a space in the Harry Truman building. He seems to be able to get wherever he wants to get and have the keys with him.
I'm glad you brought up the myth and reality with Trump's bravado. You know, from the beginning, Colonel Wilkerson, I was always suspicious of the cabinet he brought in. And this is what's so interesting, because you brought up the example of Korea. What I'm seeing from Donald Trump now, Colonel Wilkerson, is there's some of that madman, like, let me push the limits. He's talked poorly about Russia. He's spewed a lot of misinformation, actually, about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But I think that this overall strategy is a bit of a miscalculation at this point. Right now, Russia doesn't have to come to the table if it doesn't want to. The tariffs that he just slapped on China just slaps them right back on coal and agricultural industry. They're going to sue the United States at the WTO, whatever that will do. But then they've also done the rare earth minerals around the U.S. military and sanctioning those as a tit for tat around sanctions. I'm just curious on whether you believe that Donald Trump's quote unquote madman diplomacy can really sustain in this age of the rise of Russia, China, BRICS, this overall new world order that we're seeing, which Donald Trump's not very happy about, and he wants to do something about it.
I don't think his way of going about it will work, at least as it's been exemplified so far. I think it's just more of the same, with lots more bombast and a lot of rhetoric and a lot less thought. At least I can give credit to Blinken and Sullivan for evil thought, but in my view, but at least they had thought. I don't think, first of all, you can stop this. This is going to happen. I think the best you can do, and what you should do, what wisdom, if it prevailed, would cause you to do, is to go along with it. Not in the sense that you surrender. There's no surrender or victory associated with this kind of movement. In the sense that you accommodate it and you deal with it and you prosper from it yourself. And you don't try to fight it in the sense of using your vast military strength to do so. And there's a asterisk. If you've read Dexter Filkins' article in the New Yorker, Dexter finally, General Leach and I kind of put him on right in that article. And it's a very good article in terms of how weak we are, conventional forces, how weak we are, how we would depend entirely on our nuclear weapons if we went to war with a peer power entirely, because we couldn't beat them with conventional might. So if you recognize what's happened, you recognize the irrepressible inexorability of what's happening, that history is against you. History is moving as it once moved before to shift from the east to the west. It's now moving to shift from the west to the east. If you understand that and you try to accommodate it and make all the money you can from it and do all the trade and commerce you can from it, which is kind of what happened with the East as they tried to accommodate the shift from their territory into our territory, as it were, then you can make a whole lot better world out of it. You don't have to be in a zero-sum game. You don't have to be in a hegemonic game. You don't have to be in this, this is what I don't like about Mearsheimer's realism, for example. You don't have to be in this world where you have to admit to yourself that war is inevitable, that we are going to kill each other because of the power struggles in the world. I think that's nonsense. I know history vouchsafes that John is more often than not right, but it still means that there's no hope. There's no ability to get out of this trap, if you will. And right now, the trap has a part of it that is very, very dangerous: nuclear weapons. And to arrest this shift, if you maintain the posture that Donald Trump and the rest of this empire seems to want to maintain, you're going to result in using nuclear weapons, because that's the only thing you have at the end of the day to stop the shift. And you're going to stop it all right. You're going to stop it for all of human civilization, probably. And that's a daunting prospect to think about it. And yet, I've been alive long enough to know that this country sometimes makes some really bad decisions. And this would be the ultimate bad decision, in my view. There's no other country on earth that I can think about right now that possesses nuclear weapons that has the remotest thought of using them, except us.
Realism, I think, makes a lot of assumptions too, because in these interim steps before nuclear conflict, which the world is unfortunately headed toward, there are a lot of perhaps different ways of going about, for example, the United States in the South China Sea and in the Asia Pacific, or the United States in Eurasia as a whole, along Russia's border in Eastern Europe. There are different ways, perhaps, that you could go about attempting to achieve your interests without provoking and promoting war, right? It's like an inevitability of war, but the wars it's one-sided. The inevitability really falls on the side of Washington, D.C., it seems like, because China, for example, and Russia too, they didn't ask for militarization. They didn't say this was the only way that doing things relating to each other, working out differences could be done. Russia tried so hard to prevent the conflict in Ukraine with many, many, many attempts at making deals with the West. China has said they'll always talk with the West. They do business greatly with the West, but they never said that this needs to happen. So it seems like there's some one-sidedness here that often isn't acknowledged, in my opinion, with realism, that there are players who are pushing for war. Then there are also players on this chessboard, if we look at it like that, that are not, regardless of whether they engage in it or not, which Russia had to. Your thoughts?
No, you're right. And history demonstrates that from time to time, at least, and those times are very horrendous in some occasions, the side pushing for force is the side that wins out, often on multiple planes. That is to say, if you look at World War I or World War II, it was quite a lot of people that walked into that war knowing what they were walking into, but not knowing what they were walking into. So you got to get rid of that, I think, to have a more peaceful world, and to have a world that doesn't always court destruction with these nuclear weapons. And you don't do it by using the policies of the past. The policies of the past are bereft. They're broken. They didn't work. They led us periodically into war. war that could be settled, some would say. Some wars must end. Some wars must be fought, as Edward Wacko argue. Why? You ask the question. Why? Because there are people in the world who think the way you do, and there are people in the world who act the way you do. Democracies, I remember this argument I had with Colin Powell at one time. Someone had said, and Powell picked it up and was making it a part of his speeches as Secretary of State, democracies don't go to war. And one day I looked at him and I said, what proof do you have of that? He said, well, I know he thought I was going to use this argument. I know democracies are rather young in the scope of things in the world, 5,000 years of human history, whatever. But they don't seem to want to go to war. We could go all the way back to Athens. I said, whoa, Athens had plenty of wars. Democracies do go to war. Well, they don't do it in the modern age as much as totalitarian states. Au contraire. Democracies want to foment democracy. What is the purpose of America these days but to foment democracy? The real purpose is to make money, but he didn't have any real counter for that. Didn't have any argument to throw back at me. So as usual, he quit the argument and told me to get out of his office. My point being, let's break the mold. And let's break the mold because there won't be any mold in the future if we don't break the mold, because we have now invented the means to destroy ourselves. And so that is a mighty impetus, in my view, to doing things on a different level, to doing things better, and to doing wiser things. That doesn't mean you aren't going to have a brush conflict every now and then, or something on the periphery. You can't hardly prevent it with things like Israel existing and the tension that brings. But again, I go back to my theory, and I don't think it's theory. I think it's reality. Israel is our attack dog in the Levant. That's what they are. You could throw AIPAC out tomorrow morning and we'd still be using Israel as our attack dog in the Levant, because we want to keep a reasonable hegemony in the Middle East, but we don't want to have boots on the ground necessarily to do it. So we have Israel to do it for us. And that's, I find that unconscionable this late in man's life on this planet, this early in the 21st century, if you will, a century in which we may be, I think we're aptly named the Anthropocene age, meaning very basically that things are being affected by mankind. You don't put a negative or a positive on that, but I would put a negative on that. Things are negatively being impacted by mankind. Mankind has become the dangerous animal on this planet, the most dangerous animal on this planet. And some would argue that he's destroying it. Well, let's just speed that up. Let's go to nuclear war. Well, if you use the same template that we've been using for the last 5,000 years, you're going to do that. A scientist said a few years ago on the front page of the New York Times, in an article that the New York Times printed, I couldn't believe it, that we're the first civilization in human history to have the technological ability to eliminate ourselves, but the technological ability to prevent that. Do we have the wisdom to do that?
But these big promises, well, that's the question here, Colonel Wilkerson, because many have hinged their hopes on Donald Trump navigating this world to prevent that exact scenario. And he campaigned on the notion that he was going to, and he even said recently that he is interested in denuclearization and, of course, ending the conflict in Ukraine. They're not so easy once in the halls of power. Do you feel like, it's very early in his administration, but do you feel like when it comes to the condition of the empire in conjunction with this very changing world order, that Donald Trump can play any positive role at all in the coming next 3+ years? Or are we going to see a repeat of his first term where the bravado and the bluster and the attempt to look different ended up turning into its exact opposite, and we saw very little difference.
True. And that which we saw that had the potential to be hugely new was adumbrated or stymied in its bid before it was even born, like North Korea. And I fear for that again, even though he seems to have come to this administration with a lot more organization and a lot more knowledge, which one would expect, of where the warts and nuts and bolts were, frayed or broken or whatever, and executive orders par excellence to fix that or to do something about it. And yet I'm watching this unfold, and I'm watching what is very trivial take place. For example, what is doing away with the Department of Education, even though I might be in favor of it, but I would certainly do it in a different way. Those people have jobs and families and such, so you can't just walk through the door and say, go home, you're out of a job, you're out of work. You got to do it in a more human way than that if you're going to do it. But what does that have to do with the kind of problems, the kind of challenges you and I are discussing right now? Absolutely nothing. So it's fighting over a tempest in a teapot while the stove the teapot is on is exploding. You're just not going to accomplish anything worth note by focusing on these issues that don't matter a tinker's stem, even though they might be politically sellable and politically positive for your cult. You're not going to accomplish anything in the bigger scheme of things, and in the scheme of things that says, I arrest this shift of power, or maybe you don't arrest it, I don't think that's possible, but I accommodate it and I go along with it so that we can maximize our advantage from it as it happens. And we're talking about a lot of years here that this is going to take to happen. The last one took about 1,000 years. This one will be faster, but I don't think it'll be that much faster. So accommodating it and not using nuclear weapons in that time and preventing the climate from pretty much taking us out anyway are going to be major challenges in this experience, which require, in order to be met, they cannot be met otherwise, cooperation, collaboration, and comity. There's no way you're going to meet the challenges of the climate with just one country or two or NATO doing what needs to be done while the rest of the world doesn't, or vice versa. It looks more like the rest of the world might be doing more than we are. You can't solve the problems that way. Everybody has to work together. If there were a providence, a divine providence, if there were some guiding hand in the universe, I would think that he or she would be looking down right now saying, okay, you got one chance, and then it's toast. You're done. Because I'm not going to give you another chance. You don't deserve it.
Kofi, follow me.